The number of people waiting for routine treatment on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5, according to new figures.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We are, of course, live on your TV, your radio and online. And this is what we've got for you today.
Well, the number of people waiting for routine treatment on the NHS could rise as high as 1 in 5, according to new modelling. The figure currently stands at 1 in 9, with some people waiting up to 4 years for surgery.
President Biden has announced another $800 million in military assistance to Ukraine. It comes amid reports of Russia stepping up activity in the east and the south of the country.
Home Secretary Priti Patel will today sign a 5-year deal with Rwanda to send some asylum seekers to the country to have their applications processed there.
And ahead of one of the biggest holiday weekends of the year, we'll ask travel expert Simon Calder how you can get ahead of the Easter chaos. Or can you get ahead of the Easter chaos?
Yes, or are you going to spend your Easter in a queue? You can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews.
Well, our top story today, new figures show the number of people waiting for routine surgery on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5.
The figure at the moment stands at 1 in 9, with over 6.1 million patients currently waiting for non-urgent treatment. 23,000 of those are waiting more than 2 years, and a handful are waiting up to 3 or 4.
Well, many of the people on the backlog are likely to be in pain and discomfort, with leading physicians warning that prolonged waits could lead to emotional and physical distress.
The figures lay bare the extent of the backlog crisis as COVID infections in the UK remain high, with an estimated 1 in 13 people now infected.
Now, despite NHS leaders saying they're doing all they can to mitigate the crisis, efforts have also been hampered by severe staff shortages right across the health service.
The recent hike in national insurance, which came into force last week, is part of the government's plan to tackle the post-pandemic backlog and is expected to raise £39 billion over the next 3 years.
Well, let's talk to Chris Thomas, who's Senior Principal at the Institute for Public Policy Research, and is here. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Look, this is a very disturbing picture, looking as though it's going to get considerably worse. How do we take action now to try and mitigate that?
Well, you're right. The figures are shocking. They speak for themselves. I think the government has to consider a few things. The biggest challenge the NHS faces at the moment is just workforce capacity. There aren't enough people to deliver the care that we need to get through the backlog. There's also a problem with how much we're preventing need at source. So can we do things earlier so people don't have to come in with serious illness to the NHS later? And there is a question of money. We're going to a living with COVID strategy now. That means COVID-19 will become endemic. That has a big resource kind of implication. So there's a question of, do we have enough funding to deal with the resource needs that COVID-19 now introduces as a regular item?
Is it a bit of a postcode lottery as well? Because some regions seem to be coping and others clearly don't. And also different sorts of illnesses and different sorts of treatments.
I think you're right. So what we tend to see is that in some of the more affluent parts of the country, say, where need might be a little bit lower, the NHS might be coping a little bit better. In some parts of the country where maybe deprivation is a little bit higher, we see much higher waiting lists and people struggling to get in. The kind of consequence of that is if people are waiting a very long time, what they're probably going to do, if they can afford to do so, is take their own action, is to use private alternatives and to bypass those waiting lists. And that can create a two-tier system in its own right. So we can see inequalities emerge that way as well.
You talk about almost like a prevention strategy to get at things early. How well funded is the NHS for that? Because we certainly look at the GP situation, but what we don't ever seem to focus on is the pharmacy side. Now, they're a key part of the NHS structure, struggling with funding. Perhaps they could be utilised in a better way.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So what we have in the NHS at the moment is still a model that's very rooted in the 20th century. We're quite, the NHS is quite good at very acute emergency care traditionally. What we haven't managed so much is the transition to this kind of modern style of care where people have long-term conditions, chronic need. They might need more regular appointments. And that means more care in the community. That's pharmacists, that's general practitioners, that's care at home. And I think we could be doing a lot more with that to reduce the demand on hospitals and the waiting lists that
I mean, you
that
hear
you've
this
outlined.
time and again that we don't value our pharmacists enough. They're very highly trained, I mean, almost to the medical care level. There's a lot that they could be taking on. I don't know whether they'd want that or how they would be paid, but they are a resource that we don't seem to be using sufficiently.
I think that's right. I think community pharmacists particularly are calling out for more responsibility and for the value that they can add. So I think it's a big opportunity to take pressure off, particularly general practitioners. That's where the big opportunity lies.
It's interesting, isn't it, that through a lot of this, and it's understandable and correct to an extent, that politicians are going to turn around and say, well, a lot of this is down to the pandemic. It's caused so much strain on the system, which it has, there's no doubt. However, this is a problem we've been talking about for decades, actually.
Yeah, I think that's right. So if we look at the pandemic figures, obviously there's been a shock. But if we go back to 2019, waiting lists were on a trajectory to record levels already. So there's something about the approach to healthcare that's been going wrong for a lot longer than that. I think we can look back at the challenges that predate the pandemic. They're the same challenges that exist today. The workforce crisis was a crisis in 2019. Resourcing was a challenge in 2019. Whether we're preventing need was a challenge in 2019. So the same answers that have always been good remain good, and the government can take some plan forward.
A lot of people turn around and then say, well, look, the NHS needs significant reform, changing in the funding model, changing in the usage model. But of course, it's like a sacred cow, isn't it? The minute you try to tamper around the edges, people get very irritated.
Yeah, no government has got the guts to actually tamper too much with the NHS, have they?
Yeah, I mean, I think the principle here is that people still really buy into the kind of founding mission of the NHS. So they want something that's free at the point of use, that's equal, that's universal, that's comprehensive. I think that means that kind of maintaining some aspects of its historic models, say that it's tax funded, that it is free at the point of use, that it's funded by government, remains good. There's still huge potential within there for reform, for changing the way that the workforce works, for bringing in community pharmacy in a way that we haven't in the past, for moving more towards prevention rather than just very, very acute treatment. So there are big things out there for a government with political will that maintain the principles that people like. And that's where I think they have to look.
Where's the private sector playing in all of this? You say a lot of people choose to go private if the waiting lists are huge and they can afford to do so. We were saying before the show, you know, if you go private, the people you see are NHS doctors just working privately on the side.
Often in an NHS hospital.
Yeah, indeed. So what happens for much of private healthcare is that it's someone, you know, that's facing a long wait. They might pay to try to bypass some of that wait. I mean, I wouldn't blame them. I mean, the anxiety or the pain of waiting for care is quite significant. We often don't think about that enough. But you're right, it is the same capacity often that exists in the NHS anyway. So it's not helping get through those waiting lists. It's just reordering some of the queuing system. So, I mean...
But is that a good or a bad thing for the NHS itself? Does it erode the NHS or does it help it?
So I would argue a bad thing. So the problem is that it widens inequalities. It leaves those probably with the most need to wait the longest. I mean, the NHS works best when it's at the point of need because that's the right ordering system in terms of resource allocation. The private sector kind of working tends to be more expensive just overall, and it goes against what people want. I think this is the most important point, that people, even those that are using private services, aren't doing so because they really want to. They're doing it because the government hasn't created an NHS that's good enough. That's what they want.
So what's the answer then? Is more money for the NHS really, and more recruitment?
Yeah, some of it has to be about more money, but it can't all be about more money, can it? So there has to be.
No, because we always argue, don't we, that it's a bottomless pit.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, we do have to account COVID-19 is a regular, and you know, it will move to an endemic. It will have a consistent level of new demand that the NHS hasn't had to cope with before. So that justifies more funding, just to kind of maintain supply in the way that it's always worked. But I think there's huge potential that we can think about in terms of reform. We can think about how the workforce works. We can think about what innovation is out there. The UK as a country compared to, say, France or the continent is not very good at the spread of innovation. We find it very hard to get it, not necessarily into some parts of the country, but the whole country consistently.
There's been a lot of criticism about the national insurance hike because people can't afford it at the minute, which is absolutely understandable. £39 billion it will raise over however many years it is, I don't know now. But we hear that the inflation rate, as it goes up, has in effect wiped that out already.
Yeah.
Now,
So if the NHS was expecting that money, it ain't going to get it.
But it means if there wasn't the insurance hike that people can't afford to pay, we'd be in an even worse position.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's like the perfect storm, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there'll be lots of people today working in local NHS trusts, CEOs, directors of finance, that are saying, look, what I was expecting to happen, the thing that I'd made my care plans on at a time that, waiting lists are very high, that demand is very high, that accident and emergency are struggling, ambulances aren't getting to people. They're saying, look, the cost of living crisis, the inflation, the extra costs I bear mean that I can't make ends meet. And that will have tangible consequences for people trying to get their care.
We always hear our politicians say it, and we believe it, we've heard it so much, that the NHS is the best care system in the world. Is it?
So what tends to happen with the NHS is that I think the principles that sit behind it are the best principles in the world for a healthcare system. Are the outcomes the best? No. And I think the British public are very clear that it's a people's priority for health outcomes to be the best. We at IPPR looked back at polling since the 1980s. What we found was that consistently the NHS has been the number one issue for the general public. So they really want it to be the best. So I think what we need to do is we need to say, OK, we understand that the principles behind it can work. We see that it can work because in some parts of the country, the NHS is fantastic. It's not that it's kind of bad everywhere, it's just inconsistent. And what needs to happen is political commitment to making that the case everywhere. That's the real challenge ahead of us.
OK. Chris Thomas, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. It's interesting, isn't it, I think, in all of it. And it's like with the national insurance hike that people don't want, a lot of campaigning against, and a lot of people obviously just can't afford to pay. And yet it's the same people who then say, we need to be investing more, we need to be paying nurses more. It's like, well, then we've got to pay for it.
We have got to pay for it.
I think sometimes we all just need a really big dose of cold reality with these sort of things. If we want better, we've got to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a wonderful principle, the idea that healthcare for all at the point of need is the most brilliant principle, but it's a very expensive one, and other countries don't even go anywhere near it.
No, and the thing is that the remit of the NHS has changed so much since it was brought about, hasn't it? You look at your long-term healthcare. I mean, look at my cost to the NHS would be astronomical.
Yeah, your cost
I should think.
a fortune.
I cost a fortune.
And that's where there were always those arguments like, is IVF something that the NHS should be providing, or is that a choice, and a very expensive choice indeed, that should be made privately? There are all sorts of arguments like that.
What do you think about that? Because I'm not a parent, and I have to say I always find the IVF thing, and I know people who've had it and they're desperate for families and all the rest of it, and I sympathise, I really do, but I struggle with that as a funding
Cosmetic
issue.
Surgery. When I say cosmetic, I mean something that needs doing because it is affecting your life, but it is actually still cosmetic surgery. Should that be available on the NHS?
Yeah, the bariatric stuff,
surgery.
Which is weight loss surgery.
But it's about maintaining life and preserving life. Bariatric surgery often, so you could argue that should be available on the NHS, and is, but just where do you stop? I suppose that's always the question with the NHS.
Interesting, isn't it? It's why it's a bottomless pit.
Yeah, and it is nevertheless why we're so proud of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
Oh, your views on that would be very welcome today if you would. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, very nearly 6:14. Here we go. There you go. It is 6:14. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories.
Asylum seekers who cross the English Channel in small boats will be flown to Rwanda for processing under new government plans. Those seeking refuge in the UK but deemed illegal by the government will be flown 4,000 miles away while their claims are assessed offshore. The Home Secretary is expected to sign a deal with the East African nation during a visit today.
Dozens of NHS patients have waited more than 3 years for hospital care in England. That's according to new figures obtained by the PA News Agency. At least 8 patients have been on a waiting list for more than 4 years, one person waiting 4.5. Leading surgeons have described the data as shocking.
Justice Minister and Tory peer David Wolfson has resigned, citing the most recent Partygate fines. The minister said he had no option than to quit over what he calls the repeated rule-breaking in Downing Street. The Prime Minister has already paid one fine and conceded that more could follow.
People going away for the Easter weekend? Well, if that's you, plan ahead. The Department for Transport said it's working to minimise disruption, but they're advising travellers to allow extra time for their journeys. Flight cancellations this week, queues for Channel ferry services as well.
Why would you? Lots of views already coming in, particularly about access to NHS care and things like that. Martin says, I've been waiting for 3 months just to have a simple bone correction treatment. Mine is nothing major, but if this carries on, it could develop into something worse. I hope this crisis is solved sooner rather than later.
You see, I don't know, Martin, if you've got pain with that. You may not. But it's that sometimes when you have that level of pain that you can cope with, but it goes on for a long time. It absolutely grinds you down.
Yes, it does.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
George says, I just want to see my GP in person again. The transition to Zoom appointments, in my opinion, has meant that some people cannot communicate their medical problems. You see, I wonder if it's a good triage service, though.
How do you do your triage for your doctor?
I haven't seen a doctor in several years. Well, apart from my specialist, who I see at the hospital for my type 1, I haven't seen a doctor in the flesh for
But have you needed
years.
to?
Well, I've had some appointments and had them over phone calls or Zoom. I see, and I like that. It's more convenient for me.
I had a real go at my surgery when they invented this thing. I can't remember what it is now, but you can't ring and make an appointment anymore. You have to type. You have to do it online, and you have to fill in a load of stuff that you filled in last week, or you've already. And you think this is crazy, but doctor rings you back straight away.
Yeah.
Straight away. She said, I know it seems like a pain, but the minute you start typing, it comes up on my screen.
Yeah.
And I can immediately get back to you.
We do fear...
And I thought that was brilliant, actually.
Yeah, we fear change, as they said in Wayne's
We
World.
fear the computer getting in between us and the GP. We value the ability to be able to see your GP. But we did go through, I mean, if you remember in the olden days, GPs used to come to they paid home visits.
Yeah.
They used to come to your house. And we had to get past that. That wasn't feasible any longer. We now had, we go through the business of actually getting through the receptionist. That's always controversial. But maybe now this is just another phase. It's another evolution that you've actually got to go online, say, I want to see the doctor because, as long as they do get back to you. But at the moment, I've been very impressed.
Yeah, I've been quite impressed with it, but maybe it doesn't work in every surgery. If you're a receptionist at a GP surgery, please get in touch this morning. And I know it doesn't apply to all of them, I know, but why are so many so rude?
I think because they just have to be so defensive. Maybe they deal with people who aren't always reasonable.
Maybe.
That toughens them up. I don't know. I mean, defend yourselves. I know doctors' receptionists have a pretty bad...
It's really front-facing, as they say.
Yeah.
But really, please just be a little bit nicer. Just a little bit nicer. To be fair, the ones at my current surgery are very nice.
You're saying that just to protect yourself.
Just in case they're watching.
Yeah, exactly.
But when I lived in London, I had a right battle on my hands.
Well, and that's it. Is it worse in a big city?
Probably.
Rather than being in a green, leafy suburb, I don't know.
Yeah, more people, more stress, probably.
Yeah, probably is. Go on, give us your views. Defend yourself if you're a receptionist. We want to hear from you.
I'm sure you're very nice, really.
Yeah, I'm sure you're lovely. But you can get in touch with us, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Stay with us, though, because we're going to be talking to Simon Calder, the travel expert who gets everywhere. Will you be getting anywhere this Easter, though? It's going to be problematic. We'll get all the details for you
after this.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit misty and murky out there for many today, but it is going to brighten up and it's going to get a bit warmer as well, not just today, but actually as we head into the Easter weekend. Low pressure clearing away to the east, another one out west, but that's only making slow progress towards us. Generally, we're sitting under a little ridge of high pressure, which will bring most of us a fine dry day today. It is quite grey and murky out there first thing, a lot of mist and low cloud in the south. It'll take a while to clear. thicker cloud too for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. A little bit of rain here and there, certainly for the Western Isles, could be quite damp, but otherwise it's generally dry. Skies will tend to brighten. Some good spells of sunshine over northeast England and brightening up across South Wales, southern England as well. Well, we could reach 20, maybe 21 Celsius. Generally temperatures in the mid to high teens. Still a bit cooler across Western Scotland, where there will be that thicker cloud and a bit more rain just trickling in to the far west of Scotland, particularly the Highlands through this evening. Rain edging away from the north of Northern Ireland, so for many it becomes dry and clear. Again, turning a bit misty and murky, especially along the south coast, and temperatures dropping down into single figures. On to Good Friday, and for most it's a fine looking day, dry and bright. There will still be some patchy rain across northern Scotland, maybe a few showers across Shetland, certainly early on. The threat of cloud increasing further west. We may just see 1 or 2 showers developing during the afternoon, but for many places it's a brighter day on Friday, better chance of seeing some lengthier spells of sunshine. And it will be feeling warmer once more. Temperatures more widely into the high teens, perhaps into the low 20s across the southeast. Some coasts will be cooler, particularly if it's misty and murky around the southwest or on the east coast of England with the breeze from the sea. Into the long weekend, many places will be dry, certainly for the first few days, and quite warm when the sun's out. We are going to see a change to cooler, more showery weather for Easter Monday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's 2 questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.23, very good morning to you watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the TV and your radio and online. And don't forget, you can do the GB News app and watch us wherever you go. Then you can take us with us in your car.
I'm very fond of the GB News app.
I am too. I watch that.
Because I've got rid of... it's very good for... I use the GB News app on the TV. Smart TV.
I've got a smart TV, but I don't...
Yeah, because I haven't got...
I don't know how to find these apps, but I'll have a look for it.
But no, because I got rid of my satellite and all that sort of thing.
Yes,
so
you don't need one now,
So I don't
do you?
pay for any of that now, and just downloaded the app onto the telly and watch it on that way. It's really good.
Well, what I like about it is I use it on my phone, carry it around the house with me then.
Yeah.
So I can just always be listening to it or watching it. It's good.
Handy, isn't it?
It is.
Isn't it clever how the world's gone this way?
Nuts, actually.
Nuts. Yeah.
So what you have a smart TV that gets you nearly everything you want to watch.
Yeah, everything I want to watch, yeah. So not actually forking... Well, you fork out for sort of Netflix or whatever, but you don't...
For a subscription service.
Yeah, but the rest of it...
The rest of it's on apps.
Yeah. Just watch on demand.
Ooh, it's brilliant, isn't it?
It's very clever.
You got one of those big tellies on the wall?
No, it's not on the wall. I don't like
A
them on...
curved one?
No. I've always wanted a curved one. They went out of fashion.
Yes, they were a bit of a fad, I think.
Bit of a fad.
Are you watching us on a curved telly?
I always thought they looked quite good, but...
They do look good, but I do fancy an enormous one on the wall.
Oh, that'd be nice. One day. Are they getting thinner and lighter?
Yeah, they are.
Let's have a look at what's still to come for you this morning. We're going to be in South London as black cab drivers speak out about rising fuel costs and congestion charges. They're not happy.
And also coming up in the next hour, as Sweden and Finland consider joining NATO, we'll speak to an expert who says now is the time for them to do it.
Now, it is the Easter weekend, rapidly approaching, of course, but there have already been severe travel warnings. It's going to be chaos on the roads, we think, and on the rails, and on the seas, and in the skies.
Yeah, everywhere. Why go out? We're going to talk to our travel correspondent, Simon Calder, any second now. He's at Heathrow Airport, where I think the queues are just starting. And he's got stuck in it, I think, at the moment, so we'll try and get him later. But I don't know why anyone would try. Just getting into work today, two major roads that normally bring me into London, completely closed.
Oh,
don't know
really?
why.
See,
this a really weird, circuitous route.
This is what I don't quite understand. I mean, I know work has to be done, but why do they always seem to do it at the time when everyone's off work and likely to be? It's a bit like apparently they're shutting all the routes into Euston for a lot of work, but it's the FA Cup final this weekend.
Yeah, why don't they think ahead?
So that's going to be absolutely chaotic. Absolutely chaotic. So I don't understand why they don't think ahead. But then do we have to change our attitudes a bit and just think, Easter, we're not going to go anywhere?
Do we have to be more flexible? I mean, that's the trouble is when you've got children at school, you can't be as flexible. But maybe the rest of us have to. You look at Easter and think, I won't go away at Easter, I'll go away after Easter.
Yeah.
Or, even Christmas, New Year, that sort of thing. We all want to travel at the same time, and maybe that's a luxury we can no longer afford.
Yeah, I have to say, I've never fallen prey to this because I always end up working over Easter.
Yes.
So,
Me
I mean,
too.
that's...
But I like that. I don't mind working
while
other people are sitting in a queue.
No. It's not bad, is it, as far as that goes?
But honestly, if you are setting off at the moment and you've got plans for Easter and you want to travel, maybe to see family or whatever, or just to get away for a break, you are going to face queues, either in the car or at an airport or something. And like the ones we're looking at now, airport queues. And it's just so demoralising and disruptive, really, when you want to be having a nice time. Anyway, we'd love to hear from you. If all of this talk of the disruption is putting you off your plans or making you change your plans.
That's what would be interesting. Are you actually thinking again as a result of all of this? GBViews at gbnews.uk, getting loads of you talking about the NHS. The story today is that the latest figures show that within 2 years, 1 in 5 people could be still waiting for routine surgery on the NHS, and loads of you getting in touch. Rachel says, my sister's had so many disrupted physiotherapy appointments since her groin injury last year. She's needed help getting back to full strength, but the constant disruption has meant she's been in pain for way longer than she should have been.
It's awful, isn't it? Sarah says, I'm terrified of trying to have cancer treated during this period. My family has a history of breast cancer, and I'm really concerned that if I'm diagnosed, it could be more difficult to treat if chemo is delayed.
Yeah. Mark says the service should be at the point of need only. We shouldn't be funding cosmetic procedures, sex changes and IVF. I would have thought that actually gender reassignment is... For some people,
For some people, it is.
It is lifesaver for some people.
Indeed.
I know it's controversial, but it is a lifesaver for a lot of people.
We're talking about getting away for Easter and what sort of travel disruption you are likely to face. I think we can get through now to Simon Calder.
Oh, there he is.
At Heathrow. Hello, Simon.
Good morning, and yes, it's a bright and beautiful morning here at the UK's biggest airport, but as you say, wherever you're going this Easter, be prepared for delays and disruption, I'm sorry to say.
How bad could it get, Simon?
Well, all depends where you want to start. Should we start on the roads? It's very difficult to predict. The motoring organisations are warning that it could be the busiest weekend that we've seen for leisure travel for over 2 years. Of course, it's the first one where an awful lot of people are going to think, oh, we've been stuck for a couple of years. Let's go off and enjoy ourselves. Now, while most of the roadworks are going to be taken away, there are still going to be intense problems around the M25, which we're looking at there, I believe, very close to me here. There's also, of course, going to be massive problems on the motorways of Kent, not least because the M20 motorway is mostly being used as a lorry park at the moment. And then the usual suspects, the A303 roundabout Stonehenge. A lot of drivers have been waiting there since the Stone Age. And the northern parts of the M6, particularly if it's a lovely day and everyone wants to head to the Lake District. So the roads are going to be pretty grim. And we already know that the railways, well, particularly the West Coast Main Line, that runs from London Euston to the West Midlands to Northwest England, southern Scotland. No trains at all in and out of London Euston all over the weekend, Friday to Monday, and then lots of individual engineering projects further north along the West Coast Main Line. And if you're trying to get to an airport in London, well, the Piccadilly line between Heathrow and central London, that's going to be closed. And so is the main Gatwick Express line from Victoria, but there are alternative trains there. And finally, completing the trilogy, you've also got Stansted Airport, which is not going to be seeing the Stansted Express this weekend.
This is crazy, isn't it? I mean, I know that some of it may be unavoidable, but surely, with better planning, they knew Easter was going to happen at this time of year. I mean, why couldn't this be avoided?
A very good question. Well, actually, in 2016, yes, 6 years ago, Network Rail did a proper investigation and they concluded public holiday is absolutely the time to do it because, of course, you got fewer commuters. Then COVID happened. Now we're in the position where actually leisure travel at weekends, and particularly over holidays, is vastly higher in some cases than just normal commuting. Furthermore, you've got the FA Cup semi-final between Manchester City and Liverpool being held at Wembley Stadium. Really easy to get there on the train in normal times, not this weekend. So, yes, a pretty perfect storm if you're staying on the ground.
How about a little trip across the channel then, David?
Right, OK. So if you are going to, hoping to sail across from Dover to Calais, well, that's going to be tricky because, as GBNews has been reporting, P&O Ferries hasn't sailed now for 4 weeks today. And that was when they suddenly announced, right, everybody, you're all fired and we've got some cheaper staff in. That's on the Dover-Calais run. They are actually now running on their other routes. People are being advised, if you haven't got a confirmed booking, do not go to Dover. And DFDS, which has been doing lots of the carrying P&O Ferries passengers, saying again this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if you book with P&O, find another solution. And of course, that might be aiming for somewhere else on the channel, Newhaven Dieppe, or one of the crossings from Portsmouth or Plymouth.
It's such a shame because it looks quite a nice day behind you there, almost a blue sky, and it's certainly a clear sky.
Yeah, and everything going pretty smoothly here, actually, today, which you kind of expect because British Airways has so far cancelled, I calculate, 52 flights. That's mostly European destinations, but also short-haul flights to and from Belfast City, Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Manchester and Newcastle. Those should have been notified some time ago. So therefore, if you are in the position of having your flight cancelled, they should have found you an alternative. Meanwhile, down at Gatwick, around the M25, EasyJet have cancelled about 30 flights today, including lovely Greek holiday islands such as Kefalonia and Zante. So again, the airline is absolutely responsible for getting you there on the day and paying you compensation on top.
Talking of exotic places, just briefly, Simon, are you missing Lake Como?
Well, I flew in last night from there. It was absolutely gorgeous in the afternoon. But now back in London because, well, frankly, it's a lot cheaper going a few days before Easter than over the Easter break.
Exactly. We've got to be more flexible, I think.
Yeah. Simon, good to talk to you.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks very much. I hope you don't spend the rest of the weekend at Heathrow Airport.
No, oh, you missed it, because you know, we had Simon in the studio last weekend, didn't we? And then I think it was on Monday, and we talked to him, and it was the view with Lake Como behind him.
Gosh.
You have no idea. It looked absolutely
He knows where to go,
stunning.
but he clearly knows when to go as well. And I think that's the thing, is that we're just going to, unless you are completely bound by, you know, kids off school and things like that, you've just got to be more flexible and say Easter's just a date, and we'll do our Easter holiday next week or something like that.
Yeah. I think that's the way forward. Look, stay with us. Really don't go anywhere, because we've got an exciting pay-per-view heading your way. David Wooding and Liz Kershaw will be with us.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello again. It's 6:37. Now let's bring you up to date with today's top stories. Asylum seekers who cross the English Channel in small boats will be flown to Rwanda for processing under new government plans. Those seeking refuge in the UK but deemed illegal by the government will be flown 4,000 miles away whilst their claims are assessed offshore. The Home Secretary is expected to sign a deal with the East African nation during a visit today.
Dozens of NHS patients have waited more than 3 years for hospital care in England. At least 8 have been on a waiting list for more than 4 years, one 4.5. Leading surgeons have described the data as shocking.
And as we were just saying, people going away for the Easter weekend are warned to plan ahead. The Department for Transport said it's working to minimise disruption, but advising travellers to allow extra time for their journeys. And this follows flight cancellations this week and queues for Channel ferry services.
Oh, James has been in touch this morning saying we were going to see my family in Durham over Easter, but we've changed our mind because we're not nuts. So there you go.
Yeah.
I think changing your mind is a very sensible idea.
I think everybody would understand, and you can do it another weekend, but it's going to be hell this weekend by the look of it, trying to get anywhere.
I think it really is. Let's take you through the papers this morning. Political editor of The Sun on Sunday, David Wooding, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw are both with us. Good to see you
hello
today. Elizabeth, can we start with The Guardian?
Oh, Sunday name, thank you. Well, Partygate we'll start with here, and news of more fines to come, possibly, for the Prime Minister and his number 10 colleagues. And I say that because I really feel that this is now totally out of proportion. because number 10 is a workplace with 400, I believe, people going in and out of there every day. And I just picked up this picture from The Sun. We've all seen it before, but just a reminder. This is Dominic Cummings, the PM, and his wife-to-be, I think she was at the time, and another colleague, sitting in the number 10 garden, quite spaced out in the open air with a drink. And that's the subject of his first fine. And I just can't see that this is so unacceptable. And I was thinking the equivalent, perhaps, I'm sure other people might have strong views, is during lockdown, I was going into work at the BBC and Broadcasting House and doing live shows, but I also spent a lot of time sitting at my breakfast bar, and my other half, Paul, was sitting in the study. He evicted me because he needed it. All of a sudden he had to work from home. So we'd be doing that all day in the same building, passing each other in the, corridor, in the kitchen, getting a cuppa. And then at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, we'd go outside and sit in the garden and have a beer and a glass of wine. What is the difference? What's the difference? I don't see that if you've been rubbing shoulders, cheek to jowl all day, in this case doing essential work, and actually to protect the majority of the population, those that were able to stay at home, not non-essential workers in inverted commas, then what? I really don't see what all the excitement is about.
If, as you say, I mean, certainly people watching yesterday who were getting in touch, the majority was saying this is out of proportion now. But who is getting it out of proportion? Is it the police? What's going on?
Well, the police at first said they weren't going to get involved in this, and it was all down to Sue Gray. And then all of a sudden, when Sue Gray, the ethics watchdog, decided to look into it, the police then said, we're going to do something. And the big problem now with the police is that this is... Talk about going long. It's being dripped out. So I expected, after weeks of waiting for the police to decide whether any fines were going to be imposed, to get a big shed load of them in one go. We're now being told there may be more next week and the week after. So if the Prime Minister gets one in a 2 weeks' time, then another one in another week's time... Is
that political?
Well, you can't help feeling it is. Or when can Sue Gray bring her report out? Because she can't bring that report out until we've had the police report. This could go on for months. And it's that drip effect which is going to have a damaging, draining effect.
A lot of people who message in say this is all the media's fault. And I do wonder, because there was a picture in one of the papers of yet another party, and Boris was stood behind someone at a desk, and there was like a bottle of champagne in the foreground. I mean, it just seemed the most ridiculous picture to claim it
wasn't a party.
I think it's undemocratic, to be honest. And the people who came out straight away were the usual suspects: Nicola Sturgeon of the SNP, David Lammy of Labour, and other people. And so here you are, a politician and a member of a party that has no hope in hell of winning a general election. How do you unseat the democratically elected leader of the country? By banging on about this and hoping that his own party will force him to resign. And I think a lot of the media is compliant. I think, again, that you can see the divisions between opposition, whether it's in politics or in the media, to Conservatives. And it's just being used as a tool to undo the outcome of a general election in 2019. I think, why don't Boris go to the country and say, OK, vote on it. The people decide, not the media and the opposition parties.
What about though? I mean, they are setting the rules and regs. We had the very stern messages right down the barrel of the camera telling us we all had to stay at home and follow these rules. I mean, there is an argument, isn't there, to say the Prime Minister and those in his team should be living by not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law as well.
There is undoubtedly a feeling among a lot of people who, particularly those who were unable to hug their loved ones as they were dying.
Excuse me, my mum died in a care home just before lockdown, having been thrown out of an NHS hospital. We weren't allowed to go and see her. We couldn't have a funeral. I should be bitter and twisted about this. What's wrong with me?
No, but some people do feel aggrieved by that. Some people who couldn't even see their families at Christmas are quite angry about it. It's just this business of they set the rules and then
It's the
seemingly
word
didn't
party,
obey them.
isn't
It's
it?
the word party.
The word party has become absolutely toxic in this situation. I mean, is a drink and somebody you've been working with all day, somebody just gets out a cake and says, "Happy birthday, by the way, Prime Minister." Is that a party?
No.
Well, there are equally people who take Liz's view, which is that lots of people probably did similar things to this themselves and say, "What's
Well, I
the
haven't
fuss about?
said
We
that.
did this."
Well,
But take your view that it's not a great crime.
I think when you say that he stared down the barrel of the camera and said, "Stay at home, save lives, protect the NHS." Yes, he did. But he wasn't saying that to NHS staff, to water supply staff, to power workers, to delivery drivers, to supermarket staff. He was saying it to people who could stay at home. He wasn't saying it to care workers who were risking their lives going into the care homes every day. So not everybody stayed at home. A lot of people went into the workplace every day. And what this is a workplace.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a peculiar workplace. Isn't it? It is also a home, a family home. But Lord Wolfson has decided it's such a big deal, he's resigned.
Yes. Who he, you may ask.
Yeah, well, I did wonder.
Equally, you may ask, who are Nigel Mills and Craig Whittaker? They're the two MPs who've criticised the Prime Minister. There's about 70-odd MPs who've come out and said they support him. So you've got, effectively, they've got a little bit hysterical, the opposition party is saying he's got to go, he's an evil criminal. You've got most Conservative MPs backing him. You've got a rump of them there who are not happy with Boris Johnson and want him out, but now don't have an alternative leader because Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor and the number one candidate, has blotted his copybook over the spring statement, and in fact he's been fined himself. So nothing's going to happen really. And Lord Wolfson going, he's hardly a big name to resign. If Rishi Sunak had resigned, then it may well have set the ball rolling, but I don't think it'll have much of an impact. What he's trying to do as a Justice Minister in the Lords, he's basically a big name solicitor rather than a big name politician. He's trying to put pressure on the other justice ministers like Priti Patel in the Home Office, Dominic Raab in the Justice Ministry and the Attorney General to jump, but they're not going to.
No. Can just introduce another idea, what's going on across the other side of Europe. We all know that the Russians have, tried to interfere in our democratic processes before in the United States and here. Influencing public opinion through social media. Can you imagine how the Kremlin's rubbing its hands in glee? They are committing genocide and the most vile human atrocities, and we are fanning about over whether somebody had a piece of cake and a sip of Prosecco. They must be rubbing their hands in glee, not to say they're not actually stirring it up with bots.
Oh, I'm pretty sure they will be stirring some of it up on social media, won't they? Because they said Boris was enemy number one.
Yes.
So they're going to be taking advantage of it.
Yes, but,
you're right.
Does.
What do we think, meanwhile, of Priti Patel's deal with Rwanda over illegal migrants? Instead of being allowed to be processed in Britain if they get here, they're going to be sent 4,500 miles away to Rwanda to be processed.
Well, it's not an attractive destination by anybody's standards. We all know about genocide there in the 90s, and it's not a very attractive, welcoming regime now, It's very authoritarian, to be polite, and people are disappeared. And Rwanda is one of only two countries in the Commonwealth that have been adopted by the Commonwealth. No previous association, colonialism, imperialism, anything. And they have a problem with, apparently, I was reading in the Times, they have a problem with a shortage of young men because so many of their own young men are leaving, migrating to places like Britain, that they actually welcome an influx of mainly young men that have turned up on our beaches.
Yes, apparently the migrants that will be flown to Rwanda will be men. Not women and children. Well, they're going to go to an internment camp or something in
Well, that's typical of what happens on Dungeness Beach every day.
Gosh.
And spot the woman and child. Where the different people say, "Oh, why are the British people so keen to welcome Ukrainians into our home?" The situation is different. women and children are leaving Ukraine for safety and the men are staying on to fight. These men come from countries where there is war and trouble, but it's the young men of a certain age that come over.
Yeah.
And that's these young men are the ones who is proposed will be sent to Rwanda as a deterrent. So, OK, lads, pitch up on the beach in Kent, but you won't be being put in a hotel.
Do you think that
seafront.
the objective, obviously, is to put people off wanting to get in dinghies and come over the channel? Do you think that would, once word gets round that if you do actually get stopped in Britain or on the way to Britain, you'll be sent to Rwanda, do you think that will put them off trying?
Yeah, well, it's a deterrent. The aim is to break the business model of the of the traffickers who bring them over. I mean, there were 28,000 people over last year. If they know that they're risking their lives in a flimsy dinghy where 27 people died last year, and when they get here, they're going to be stuck straight on a plane, flown 5,000 miles away, even further away from the UK, then they might think twice about coming over.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, part of me rankles at the idea because it just seems so very, very strange. But if it does act as a deterrent, then...
The thing is, Steve, everybody's criticising Priti Patel. They want this illegal migration stopped. They want our taking back control of our borders after voting for Brexit. And she's done everything she can, and she's been a failure. And her popularity has dropped, and nobody has tried harder than Priti Patel. And she's trying this now. She's clearly got a will to do something. It's just that everything she does is stopped by the human right. When they land here illegally, they're put in a camp, but then human rights lawyers spend 3 years using legal aid paid for by you and me to try and get to stay here on the grounds they've got a relationship or a pet cat or whatever, and they can't kick them out. And then they vanish into the community and get jobs on the black market.
Yeah, but look, we've got to leave it there for now, but we shall catch up with you two a little bit later on. Liz Kershaw, David Wooding, thank you.
Thank you. Now, London taxi drivers have launched a Black Cabs Matter campaign against rising fuel prices, congestion charges, as well as a lack of help for older drivers forced off the road post-pandemic.
Now, opposed to a 1-minute silence, the frustrated drivers will instead be tooting in tooting to raise awareness for what they claim is a continued attack on their profession.
So for more on this, let's speak to Black Cab driver Mark Baxter. Good morning, Mark. Hello. Where are you at the moment, then?
I'm literally in a side street in Tooting, awaiting the initial beep, let's say. Let's get it going.
When is it all going to start getting going, and what are you going to do?
Well, basically, I'm just a normal working cab driver. And I've come along to the initiative today just to sort of gauge my support, really, because we're going to just sort of raise awareness by, as you quite rightly said in your intro, about having a minute's silence. Well, I'm afraid that the black cab trade is going through a time when we might be giving it a minute's silence, because we've just been attacked from all angles, really, from the last 2 mayors, for instance. And we just need to get out there and say, listen, you know, with everything that's going on, like you quite rightly said, with the fuel rises, the fact that we can't even do our job properly because we can't access any of the streets of London anymore, we can't do the job that we've been trained to do.
I mean, what do you expect to happen as a result of this? I mean, they can't do much about fuel prices for you. You know, if you can't access half of London now, because it's always gone.
Oh.
There you go. But it's been, a lot of it is pedestrianised and things. I mean, it's that. So what do you do? I don't know. It's very difficult, but...
The world is changing, I suppose, as well, isn't there? I mean, there are lots of other driving forces now that some consider cheaper and more reliable. On the other hand, we always loved the black cabs in all of our major cities because those drivers know what they're doing, know where they're going.
Knowledge.
Yeah, they've got the knowledge. Well, they have to do the knowledge still, I think, don't they?
Yeah,
which is a very, very valuable thing.
But can I say, I can't be the only person who thinks calling it Black Cabs Matter
is a little insensitive.
Distasteful. I mean, I know Black Lives Matter is in itself controversial, and some of you will think so. But even so, it just strikes me as being a little bit not the right way to market this protest, if you like. And I have to say, I have to say, things like I very rarely get a taxi. I don't live in London. I don't use taxis when I get on the tube and things, when I do have to come down. But on the occasions I have been in London and got a taxi recently, I've got an Uber.
Well, that's what they're really protesting
because
about.
you can just order it and it just turns up and off you go. And it's... But what do you do? You just go for whatever's more convenient.
That's what I mean. I think the nature of travel like that has changed. I mean, you wait till we get driverless cabs.
Oh, yeah.
You'll just be able to dial up. A driverless cab will just appear and you get in it and it'll take you wherever.
Yeah.
That's going to be weird, but it's going to happen.
Oh, it will happen. And then, of course, they'll be even more unhappy. It's one of those things, it's a bit like when we talk about high streets, I think, and people want, we need to save the high street. Sometimes I sort of think, well, what for? The world is changing. We're evolving. And it's just like, well, what do we do about the high street? Bizarrely enough, we needed some firelighters. Be like a good fire in the garden. Needed some firelighters.
Yeah.
I trotted off to B&Q, used petrol, so it went to B&Q, didn't have any. So what did I do? Ordered some off Amazon.
Yeah, that's the way the world is going, isn't it?
24 hours
Should
later,
we? I think that's a very good point. Should we fight to save the high street or let it naturally evolve into what it's going to be one day, which is going to clearly be different? The way we shop, the way we travel, it's all changing, isn't it?
Isn't it funny, though? It's uncomfortable talking, but perhaps we just need to grasp the nettle. I don't know. Let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We've got all your top stories in just a moment.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit misty and murky out there for many today, but it is going to brighten up and it's going to get a bit warmer as well, not just today, but actually as we head into the Easter weekend. Low pressure clearing away to the east, another one out west, but that's only making slow progress towards us. Generally, we're sitting under a little ridge of high pressure, which will bring most of us a fine dry day today. It is quite grey and murky out there first thing, a lot of mist and low cloud in the south. It'll take a while to clear. Thicker cloud too for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. A little bit of rain here and there, certainly for the Western Isles. Could be quite damp, but otherwise it's generally dry. Skies will tend to brighten. Some good spells of sunshine over northeast England and brightening up across South Wales, southern England as well. Well, we could reach 20, maybe 21 Celsius. Generally temperatures in the mid to high teens. Still a bit cooler across Western Scotland, where there will be that thicker cloud and a bit more rain just trickling in to the far west of Scotland, particularly the Highlands through this evening. Rain edging away from the north of Northern Ireland, so for many it becomes dry and clear. Again, turning a bit misty and murky, especially along the south coast, and temperatures dropping down into single figures. On to Good Friday, and for most it's a fine-looking day, dry and bright. There will still be some patchy rain across northern Scotland, maybe a few showers across Shetland, certainly early on. The threat of cloud increasing further west. We may just see one or two showers developing during the afternoon, but for many places it's a brighter day on Friday, better chance of seeing some lengthier spells of sunshine. And it will be feeling warmer once more. Temperatures more widely into the high teens, perhaps into the low 20s across the southeast. Some coasts will be cooler, particularly if it's misty and murky around the southwest or on the east coast of England with the breeze from the sea. Into the long weekend, many places will be dry, certainly for the first few days, and quite warm when the sun's out. We are going to see a change to cooler, more showery weather for Easter Monday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The number of people waiting for routine treatment on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5 people, according to new figures.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live on your TV, your radio and online. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The number of people waiting for routine treatments on the NHS could rise as high as 1 in 5. According to the new modelling, the figure is currently 1 in 9. Some people are waiting up to 4 years for surgery.
The US President Biden has announced another £600 million worth of military assistance to Ukraine. That comes amid reports of Russia stepping up activity in the east and the south of the country.
The Home Secretary will today sign a 5-year deal with Rwanda to send some asylum seekers to the country to have their applications processed there.
And ahead of one of the biggest holiday weekends of the year, we're live from one of the country's busiest stations, London Euston, as the travel chaos continues.
Anything you want to talk about this morning, we want to hear. GBViews at gbnews.uk, whether it's about the NHS, whether it's about Partygate, because a lot of you are messaging about that already this morning, or whether it's about granny chic.
Do we even know what granny chic is?
Apparently, think of the 1970s, I guess.
Avocado bathrooms.
Fluffy toilet seats.
Yeah. Those funny little ladies that you put over the loo rolls.
Oh, yes. Antimacassars.
What?
Antimacassars.
Antimacassars?
You know, they're the little things that go on the back of the sofa, the little things. You know, antimacassars. Someone email in and explain what an antimacassar is to Anne.
I've never heard of it.
Haven't you? You know, you go on someone's sofa and they've got like the little thing, they've got like almost like little doilies over the back of the seats and on the armrest.
And that's an antimacassar.
It's an antimacassar.
Oh, no, never heard of that.
I never thought I'd teach you anything.
No, look, if I'm going to get into granny chic, do I need an antimacassar? Could you even get them nowadays?
Oh, probably.
Do Amazon sell them?
Probably. I'm going to have a look now. Anyway, GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your stories, your opinions on any of the things that we're talking about this morning.
But our top story today and the latest figures show that the number of people waiting for routine surgery on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5.
The figure at the moment apparently stands at 1 in 9. That's over 6 million patients currently waiting for non-urgent treatment. 23,000 of those, though, are waiting for more than 2 years. And a handful are apparently waiting up to 3 or 4 years.
Now, many people on the backlog are likely to be in pain and discomfort, with leading physicians warning that prolonged waits could lead to emotional and physical distress.
The figures lay bare the extent of the backlog crisis as COVID infections in the UK remain so high, with an estimated 1 in 13 people infected.
Now, despite leaders in the NHS saying they're doing all they can to mitigate the crisis, efforts have been hampered by severe staff shortages right across the health service.
And the recent hike in national insurance, which came into force last week, is part of the government's plan to tackle the post-pandemic backlog. It is expected to raise £39 billion over the next 3 years, although there are reports in today's papers saying that hike has already been wiped out by yesterday's inflation rise.
I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Let's talk to NHS doctor Bob Gill, who's in the studio. Good to see you this morning.
Good to see you.
Look, I mean, obviously, the COVID situation is exacerbating the problem, but it's been around for years. What are the key points here? What is making it so bad?
Yeah, so the NHS since 2010 has been relatively defunded. If you compare that to historical averages on rises in NHS funding, the waiting list has been creeping up over the past decade. It got to the point of about 5 million people on the waiting list. It's certainly shot up with the pandemic. So there are many factors that are contributing to the waiting list. On top of that, you have staff vacancies, which have been exacerbated by the assault on salaries. There's been real terms shrinkage in the wages of doctors and nurses, anything up to 15 to 20%. So the NHS is not retaining staff. We had Brexit, which led to a bit of an exodus of European staff within the NHS. And we've also had a massive reduction in NHS bed capacity. So since the 1980s, we've lost 50% of NHS beds. In the last decade, around 18,000 beds have been lost. So without the staff, without the funding, and without the bed capacity, it's rational that the waiting lists are going to rise. And unfortunately, a lot of this is down to deliberate government policy.
Well, people who are forced to wait, many people are in pain and are also very, very worried that just waiting will make their condition worse. On the other hand, some are choosing to go private. If you do choose to go private, are you contributing to the crisis or are you ameliorating it?
Well, you know, it's regrettable people have to go private. How they're going private, often they're having to pay out of pocket. I've had patients of mine who've been on a waiting list for a long time, let's say with needing a hip replacement. They're having to dip into life savings to go private. Now, the NHS, you shouldn't be paying twice through taxation and then through your pocket to get a routine operation. So it's not acceptable. People are desperate and being pushed into the private sector. The NHS, as a universal public service, should be having excellence for everybody. Nobody should be waiting this long. So it may take somebody off the waiting list, but it's not the right way for that patient to go.
I hate to put you on
forced into it.
Yeah, but I hate to put you on the spot, but do you do private work?
I don't at all.
Because a lot of your colleagues do.
Yeah, well, I'm not defending that, but as a principal, I've not done any private work. All my work is within the NHS. So, you know, I can't come here and claim to be a big supporter of the NHS, yet doing private. But I entirely understand why people are opting to go privately, because the stress is far less, the income is probably greater, and you're getting people who haven't been waiting that long, maybe not that complex. So it's a bit of a pressure valve, I'm afraid. So if you destabilise the NHS, more doctors and nurses are going to drift into.
Do you think it is literally doing that? If you go private, or if you're a doctor who chooses to go take on private work, are you destabilising the NHS?
Well, that capacity, that work capacity you might be contributing to the NHS is lost to the NHS. So, you know, I'm not criticising people who go that way, but the system has been brought to a crisis point where that becomes a rational decision for a lot of people.
Does there need to be a rethink of NHS? I mean, do you think a rethink of the NHS? The problem is it's so huge. But I mean, it's looking at financing, it's looking at structure, it's looking at the needs which are addressed by the NHS. Does all that need some sort of reform? Politically, people don't want to do it, but is that what we need?
I've been in the NHS for 30 years. There's never been a time when there hasn't been reform. The problem is the reform, the direction of travel, is to replicate the American system. There's been consecutive legislation, all taking a stepwise in that direction, and there's a bill before Parliament at the moment, the Health and Care Bill, which will transform the NHS into something resembling the American managed care model, which is run by private insurers, and the objective is profit, and they'll be allowed to deny care to generate surpluses for shareholders. That's the system we're copying, and that's totally the wrong direction to be going in.
Can I just ask you about COVID? Because we're hearing that another vaccine has been approved, Valneva. I mean, I've never heard of it, I've got to be honest. Is it important that more vaccines are being developed? Is that an important step?
Yeah, I think vaccine development is important, but what's even more important, we need the evidence to show the effectiveness of the vaccine. That needs to be publicly available. We shouldn't be having policies which are based more on ideology rather than good evidence. So in terms of mandating the vaccine for people who are low risk, I do not support that, but I do support recommending vaccines for people who are high risk. And again, not forcing people into this, because we have to respect individual choice and we need to use persuasion rather than force to get people to do
Can I just ask you, I mean, obviously there's one thing about low risk and one thing about high risk. What about those in the middle? Should they be getting vaccinated or not?
Yeah, well, they need to talk to their GP or their consultant and weigh up the risks.
Would you recommend it as a doctor?
It has to be done on an individual level. So it depends on the particular risks. What is the potential harm if they get the virus? Have they already been exposed to the virus? Have they built up natural immunity? What does the vaccine add to their protection?
OK. Look, fascinating to talk to you, Dr. Gill. Thanks very much indeed.
It does feel reassuring, at least, though, that the immunologists, or whatever they are, the virologists, are still working on new vaccines because, as we know, that the virus itself seems to be working on trying to find all sorts of different ways to evolve.
Yeah, well, as they do.
Yeah,
As they do.
as they always do.
Interesting, isn't it?
OK, it's 10 minutes past 7 and London Euston Station is going to be closed for... I know, you really wanted to know this, didn't you? It's going to be closed for essential railway improvements over the bank holiday weekend, adding to the travel chaos affecting so many people.
Rosie Wright has headed down to Euston for us this morning. Good to see you, Rosie. I mean, there's still people going in and out today, but it's going to be chaos this weekend, isn't it? Cutting off such a lifeline into the capital.
Yeah, the people you can see really this morning are potentially commuters. Some people might have been really savvy and listened to advice, which is that for many of the routes you might want to take, travel around the bank holiday weekend because Euston Station is going to be closed. It's part of a significant investment into our rail network. But that means three things coming up, I'm afraid. Longer train journeys, fewer seats, and then that dreaded announcement, rail replacement bus services. It's going to be far more difficult to get about on the train this weekend. As Network Rail are investing, it's over £80 million in total. They say these works are essential. They're going to improve the passenger experience, but it's going to cause some short-term significant headaches. West Coast mainline passengers in particular, at £22 million, I'm sure you'll be delighted to know it's being invested into your part of the network, but this weekend it's going to be difficult. That's got real problems. If you are one of the 90,000 or so fans who want to go to the FA Cup semi-final in Wembley this weekend, Manchester City take on Liverpool. There are no direct trains as a result of these works, which the FA said. Network Rail have told the FA, look, we did give you a lot of time to anticipate this. We're not sure why you scheduled the game for then over this bank holiday weekend, but there's no direct trains from either Manchester Piccadilly or Liverpool Lime Street. If you get the train, it'll take you to Milton Keynes, and the advice is actually try not to get the train, take an alternative route. Saturday is going to be a bit of a headache then in terms of getting to that game, but actually real problems as well if you're trying to get the train to get to the airport. There are going to be fewer trains stopping at Gatwick over the weekend, and if you're planning on getting the tube, the Piccadilly line, to get you to Heathrow, well, they're not going to be stopping there either, so you will need to plan around it. Not great news, and I know you've been hearing earlier from Simon Calder. If you were planning on getting to the airport, just leave more time is the advice. If you're driving to the airport as well, leave more time for that. The RAC are anticipating that this weekend is going to be the busiest on the roads, the Easter weekend, in 8 years. 21 million leisure journeys anticipated. It's going to be longer if you're getting the car, take more time if you're going on the train, and we've heard, haven't we, if you're going to the airport, leave more time for those security checks. Many of these firms are being hampered by things like staff shortages from COVID sickness, which means pretty much on the first proper bank holiday weekend since coronavirus restrictions have been lifted, if you're getting the train, plane, boat, or you're driving, leave more time, anticipate delays.
Oh, what a joyous picture you paint. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I like the way, though, that the Network Rail have criticised the FA for putting the big match during the bank holiday, because I would have thought the FA would quite rightly criticise Network Rail for causing such disruption by doing all of this work at the moment. They're blaming each other, aren't they? And we poor people are the ones having to pay the price of more time.
Well, I'm going to be speaking to Network Rail a little bit later this morning, but I have got a statement, if you like. They say, unfortunately, this year there's a clash. Our £22 million Easter Railway upgrades and the FA Semi-Cup finals, regrettably, these works can't be deferred. We're urging football fans in Liverpool and Manchester to avoid going to or from the match by train, and they say they give advance notice of when these railway works are going to take place, and unfortunately, as you just had there, they can't be deferred, so find another route. Little probably did we know at that point when these matches were scheduled and the engineering works were planned just quite how much chaos there could be travelling this weekend.
OK, thank you very much indeed for that. Lovely rosy picture you paint.
Oh.
Like that?
Well, very clever.
Good, thank
very
you.
clever. You're not as green as your cabbage looking,
Oh,
as
that's
my mother would say.
No, exactly. I never understood that. But
didn't you?
How can you not be as green as your cabbage looking? That means you're cabbage looking.
Yeah. Which isn't true.
Which is, thank you.
I could lump myself in a whole lot of hot water.
I love that advice though. Leave more time. Obviously, that means that you leave enough time so you will actually get there or get in time for this kick-off or whatever. But leave more time means you're going to spend a heck of a lot of time in a queue somewhere.
Hours.
That's what
hours
it means.
and hours and hours. Is it worth it? Probably not, I would say. But anyway, let us know what you think.
Go to the big match, it would be.
It is 7:15. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories this morning. And asylum seekers who cross the English Channel will be flown to Rwanda for processing under new government plans. Those seeking refuge in the UK but deemed illegal by the government will be flown to the East African country while claims are assessed offshore. In a speech later, the Prime Minister is expected to say the action is needed to combat what he's called vile people smugglers.
Dozens of NHS patients have waited more than 3 years for hospital care in England. More than 6 million people are currently on the waiting list, with more than 23,000 waiting for more than 2 years to start routine treatment. Leading surgeons have described the data as shocking.
Justice Minister and Tory peer David Wolfson has resigned, citing Partygate. He said he had no option than to quit over what he calls repeated rule-breaking in Downing Street. The Prime Minister has paid one fine and conceded that more could follow. There's a bit of interesting stuff in the papers this morning. It's in the Mail sort of supplementary bit about first dates. They've got to think about this couple who went on it was a blind date. Anastasia and Jacob. Jacob says she ate fish for the first course, which is a faux pas on a first date.
Is it?
Apparently so. I mean, I hate this.
You mean the evening might end with a fishy kiss?
Yeah, I suppose that might be the thing.
Yeah.
Is it?
I'd say, yeah.
Do you eat
or is garlic? Would garlic be equally, unacceptable on a first date?
But then again, he said, I find the smell off-putting. I tried to persuade her to try my aubergine curry instead.
No, I would have thought curry would
better?
be... No. So what you've been looking at, it's the
So I just wonder if there are
etiquette.
any... Yes, the etiquette of first dates. I just wonder if you've had any disastrous first dates or blind dates, or if there's anything that you should or shouldn't do that you have a particular view about.
You know how a lot of people nowadays end up doing first dates by Tinder or whatever it is. You know, you swipe one way and you end up with a date. If you know straight away... Do you know straight away that it's not going to work out? And if you're sitting opposite somebody and you think, I don't like the way they look, I don't like the way they are, I don't like the way they are speaking, or maybe the fact that they've ordered fish, do you stick with it anyway until the end of the date, or do you just have the courage to say, it's not going to work for me?
Or do you do a runner, pop into the bathroom?
Oh,
and do a runner.
Oh, that's that would be unkind.
It would be
and
unkind.
Maybe you don't care.
But yeah, maybe you just got to be brutal.
Oh, yes. First date etiquette. We'd love to hear your view on that, or any of your stories, please.
Yes, that would be quite interesting.
GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, to serious matters, I think Sweden and Finland are both looking set to join NATO amid growing tensions in Ukraine.
Yes, you would have thought that was exactly what Putin didn't want. The announcement was made at a joint press conference in Stockholm, with Finland's Prime Minister stating that her country would make its decision to join NATO in the coming weeks.
Let's talk to NATO historian, journalist and ex-reserve officer, Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams. Morning to you, Peter. Good to see you once again. I mean, as Anne said, it's fascinating that this sort of strengthening of NATO is the exact opposite of what Putin thought he would manage here.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary that the whole of European security architecture that we've known really since the beginning of NATO, that's 1949, was changed when Vladimir Putin sort of ripped up the international rule book, which, on the 24th of February. And it's the speed with which all these events have sort of suddenly been announced. So Sweden and Finland have both had neutrality and have kept out of the sort of East-West conflict. Often their politicians have been keen to take advantage of the NATO umbrella, and their population, who are far more nervous, have always been against it. But since the 24th of February, in both countries, the population have swung massively behind the idea of both countries joining NATO. And they are completely separate countries, but they tend to align their foreign and defence policies. And politicians in both countries have never had that alignment before. And just to give you an indication, in Sweden, the approval rating for NATO was 28% before the invasion of Ukraine, and it's now 62%. So politicians in both countries really feel that this is the moment. There's never going to be another opportunity to just join that big umbrella, however much the Russians complain. And if they complain, then that's probably, for those countries, it means they're doing the right thing.
What sort of effect will it have, though, on President Putin? Will it make him more ruthless inside Ukraine, or will he back off? Unlikely?
Well, he's not going to back off, is he? But he has waved the fist, particularly at Finland, and just said, listen, this is not a good idea. There will be consequences. So Sweden and Finland making this announcement, you can bet your bottom dollar they've already had extensive discussions with Jens Stoltenberg, of the head of NATO. And part of that will be what happens in the application process. We need a guarantee that you're going to say yes. And whilst this application, which I'm sure will be fast-tracked, and instead of years or months will just be a few weeks, whilst that application is going through, then will you protect us as well in case Russia does something stupid or excessive? And I'm sure the answer to all of that would have been yes. So this has been predetermined, if you like, before they've gone public as they have done now.
What's it going to cost them? I mean, in the sense that, clearly they're doing it because they want protection, but at some point they've got to sort of add themselves to the pot to protect others, haven't they?
Well, that's the big advantage. Both countries, although they're neutral, they spend a huge amount on defence, just like Switzerland does. So they are already up to scratch with the rest of the NATO nations. And in terms of defence spending and in terms of modernisation, they're probably beyond a lot of the other NATO partners. So in fact, they have already added to the pot. And one thing NATO likes is standardisation. And a lot of what Sweden makes, particularly Sweden, is already used. The Swedish Bofors company, who make a lot of artillery, are already widely used throughout NATO. So it's a big win, because actually NATO would very much like to have Sweden as part of the alliance, and has always wanted that. And it's more that these countries have held back rather than NATO being quite sceptical of the advantage. So this will be a huge boost for NATO. And as you say, Putin may well take it out on Ukraine in an angry tantrum. But today is the 50th day of the war, and Putin has woken up to the news that his flagship in the Baltic Sea, in the Black Sea, called Moskva, a guided missile cruiser, is in flames and is probably sunk. So he is not going to have a very good weekend at all.
And that's the very ship, I think, that fired on, was it Pigeon Island? That island with those 18 or so Ukrainian soldiers, and killed them all.
Snake Island.
Snake Island, that's right. It wasn't Pigeon Island, Snake Island. Yeah, but and tragically, all of those Ukrainian soldiers there said, do your worst, in terms of four-letter words, and they did, and they were killed. But that ship now, as you say, is in flames and has probably sunk.
The Russians announced they had abandoned it. And if you know anything about warship drill, if you abandon a ship, it means it's as good as sunk because you're no longer trying to fight to save it. So that's I mean, the ship itself wasn't contributing a huge amount to the land war, but it was very much there as a symbol of it's the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. So for that to be done over by these new anti-ship missiles which have just come into Ukraine is a huge, bloody nose for the Russians, and they will be seeking to find a way to strike back. I have a horrible feeling. So we're going to probably see a ratcheting up of Russian aggression over the next few days, purely as a retaliatory move.
OK, Peter Caddick-Adams, good to talk to you, as always. Thank you very much indeed. We were talking earlier about sort of how you're getting hold of your GP and the sort of triage thing and not seeing your GP in person. A lot of people are not happy about it. We were sort of saying we find it all right.
Yeah, surprisingly so, yes.
Barbara's been in touch. Morning to you, Barbara. She says no mention has been made about older people who don't have the means or knowledge to use a computer. The only electronic thing I have is a phone and a 12-year-old laptop. It's too confusing. I'm 83, my sister's 88, and refuses point blank to get involved in technology.
Yes.
I think if more of us, Barbara, I would say if more of us are using the technology, that should, in theory, open up the real-time space for people like you and your sister.
Yes, should.
Whether it does, I don't know.
Well, we still want to talk, don't we? We want to hear from a doctor's receptionist, please, because you're at the front line. Time and again, receptionists have a pretty bad rep, don't they?
Yes, they do.
But we'd like to know why. But also, yes, you must deal with this. People who can use the technology to make appointments should do so. Does that free up time to actually be able to talk to the receptionist for somebody who's 83 or 88?
Sarah says about GP receptionists, they can be rude purely because patients are often so awfully rude and abusive to them. But she says by the time they get through the queues of calls and pick up the phone, there's not many appointments left, and that further frustrates patients. It's not their fault. The system is failing.
And time and again, you hear how fed up doctors and receptionists are of people who simply don't turn up for their appointment.
Oh, yes,
that
the DNA
is pretty unforgivable nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a definite no-no. Anyway, stay with us. We've got lots more still to come, including the sports stories with Paul Coit, so don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello again.
So I was just having a bit of a dance
I know,
to the music.
he was bopping to the music.
It's great. I love our little sting, as we call it in the trade.
It's happy.
It is happy, jolly, sunny.
Yeah, exactly.
And I like our little title sequence thing because it's quite retro.
Yes, it is, with the sun.
With the sun, I really like it.
Yeah, I like that too. By the way, you are watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, and we're live across the UK on both your TV and your radio.
Yes, let's tell you what's still to come for you. We're going to be talking to the Welsh Secretary, Simon Hard, about the need to level up communities as Wales is given £585 million to encourage equality.
Sounds a big amount of money. Will it work? Just before 8 o'clock, we'll ask, are garden gnomes tacky? Oh, or perhaps they're trendy. We'll ask the interior designer who says granny chic is back.
Tat. I think.
A lot of people take a lot of trouble putting gnomes in their front gardens, doing all sorts of little things like those are. We're looking at a picture. If you're listening on the radio, we're looking at a lovely picture of a very happy group of garden gnomes.
I don't mind, to be fair, I don't mind gnomes. It's the stuff in the house which just gets a bit sort of retro. I'm not into that.
I don't want to go back to avocado bathrooms.
Oh, no.
And,
Can you imagine?
And fluffy toilet seat covers.
I mean, why would you?
Well, apparently...
Not hygienic.
Apparently it's the way to look. No, they weren't very hygienic, were they? No.
Put them in the wash every other day, wouldn't you?
Gosh.
Anyway, the time for the biggest sporting events that are taking place. Paul Coyce is here. Good morning.
Is there a problem that I've got a crocheted dog over the top of the toilet roll?
Yes.
That was my favourite one.
Well, actually,
what was that for?
the lady we're going to speak to will say that that's very trendy now.
Really?
All of those things are coming back.
But why is it? But did they put them over there because it disguised the toilet roll? Because it's like you can't
look at a toilet roll.
Oh my goodness me! No, just cover it. It's a nice furry dog that's sitting in the room. Is that what it was for?
Did you have one?
Well, no, I've seen plenty in the past, and it took me a long time to actually find out where the toilet roll was. I just thought it was a fluffy dog. So
it's not what you need, is it? It's not what you need.
Yeah, I feel sorry for the dog. Yeah.
A lot of those covers were Spanish ladies.
Yes, of course they were, with the lovely dress over the top of the toilet roll. And interesting, though, I did go to Spain, and I did see a Spanish lady, and then I wondered what was it, and it turned out that she had about 300 toilet rolls over there. What are the chances? What are the chances?
Oh, and by the way, do you know what an antimacassar is?
No, I don't.
Oh, what's wrong with you people?
See, it's not just...
You know, the little things that go over the back of the sofas and on the armrests of the sofas.
What, like a lace thing?
Yeah.
What are they for?
They're to stop you putting, in the days particularly when men wore
like
brill cream on their hair.
Right.
It's to stop that sort of stain going on the sofa.
You'd leave that, because you could slip off with that.
Yeah.
That's what they have them on airlines, don't they?
They do, yeah, but they're paper ones and they
They're paper ones, but they're still antimacassars.
I can't... Where does the derivation of the word?
I don't know. Do you ask the steward or cabin staff and say, excuse me, there's no antimacassar on my chair?
Can I have that?
Iberia, you'd be OK. Anywhere else, I think you may struggle.
I insist on it. Anyway, let's talk Champions League.
Yes. Well, talking about Spain,
exactly.
I know that's exactly where we were going. It was seamlessly, beautifully done. Atletico Madrid. Now, we're talking about the dark arts. Now, when it comes to Atletico Madrid, you've got Diego Simeone, who's the manager of Atletico Madrid. It's almost like he's the villain in a cowboy movie that would dress all in black, which he always does, and he's the bad guy, and that's the way they seem to play their football. They're a very good team, but when it comes to the dark arts of football, as in the defending, the little fouls that people aren't noticing, and also time wasting, they're the kings of that. So they go into this game, which is at the Wanda Metropolitano, the home of Atletico Madrid, 1-0 down against Manchester City. And Man City have got to go out and try and at least get a draw out there, which they did. But my goodness, they had to go against it. They got kicked, they got shoved. Phil Foden was fouled. He ended up with a huge bandage on his head. Felipe flattened him and then got sent off later as well. It was pretty nasty. It was pretty X-rated. But the good news is Manchester City came through it. Good against evil, maybe a strong way of saying it, but it was almost like that last night. So well done to Manchester City, who now go into the semi-final then and have put out Atletico. See, look, there's Phil Foden there. You can see that he's already got the bandage on his head. Felipe there kicks him as he gets tackled, and then he gets one of these kicks afterwards. There was a little melee, which is a word you only ever see in football. There's plenty of those going on, and there was also a little fight there that happened in the tunnel afterwards. You get a lot of football purists that will say, oh, you don't want to see this. But there's a lot of fans that actually
Oh,
say,
yeah, well, that's a bit of excitement to it all.
we do like to see a bit of it because it's quite interesting. But they'll play Real Madrid now in the semi-final.
What was going on with my Hammers in the Europa League?
That's happening tonight. So West Ham United, West Ham are playing. What did I do? West Ham United they're playing tonight in the Europa League. This is their biggest game for 46 years, Stephen. This is a huge game. They're playing tonight, and they're going over to France. They're playing Lyon. So it was 0-0 in the first game that they played. Oh, sorry, it was 1-1 in the first game that they played at home, and now they're playing over there, and then it's a huge game because if they win, they'll go into the semi-final, and they could well play another famous Spanish team, Barcelona.
Yeah, I'm really trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about.
I know, I'm very convinced, but then I don't know.
No.
Shall I tell you what an antimacassar is?
Oh,
yeah. Okay,
you want to know, don't you? You don't want to know the football, you want to know what an antimacassar is. It's a small cloth placed over the backs of arms or chairs.
Well, we know that, don't
or the head or cushions of a sofa to prevent soiling of the permanent fabric underneath. The name also refers to the cloth flap collar on a sailor's shirt or top, used for the same reason. And why it's called an antimacassar is because the oil that men used, like Brill cream, on there is a macassar oil.
Oh, is that right?
Apparently.
So why do
That's
the sailors
why,
have the flap at the back?
Because it's easier to wash that than to wash the whole thing.
Gotcha.
Presumably sailors used to have long hair.
Well, maybe
have the macassar oil on it, apparently. So there you are, now you know.
If I had enough hair left, I'd use it.
Me too, yeah.
It's an anniversary today, Paul.
It is. Well, it is. It's a year since the dreaded Super League. Now, there was a lot of problems with the Super League coming out, saying it was all the big clubs would then get together, play in their own Champions League, everybody else would be excluded, lots of money, and everybody was up in arms about it, understandably. So UEFA have been having meetings about how they are now going to change the Champions League. And really, when you look at it, it's not a million miles away from the original Super League. So we've got the Champions League, which is great as it is at the moment, but they're thinking about bringing in wild cards, and they're using words like coefficients, which means that, to cut a very long story short, big clubs that don't qualify for the Champions League, there's still going to be a way for them to get in. So they're going to have these wild cards, which basically says how you did in the competition in the past. If you've done really well in the past, then you'll be able to qualify to play in it now, which is pretty unfair for anybody that does qualify. But it also means that it's big clubs and they're thinking money. So if you've got a Juventus, if there was a situation where Barcelona, who are not in the Champions League at the moment, didn't qualify, then they would get in by default, and then they're thinking of the money, the advertising. So really, that's what it's all about. So that's what they're working on.
Ah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. How's that going to affect, who's going to televise it, how you're going to watch it?
What do you mean?
Well, I thought what part of the problem at the time was that they were saying this enormous league, which means that basically that you'll only be able to watch those sort of matches if you subscribe.
I see, yeah.
To something like, I don't know, Sky Sports or something like that. Who's got the money to be able to pay for it?
Well, going forward, I'm sure this is what they look at, and there's also different clubs who also they'd love the idea that they televise their own games, because then they'd have their own stream of money coming in. But that may be down the line. That isn't there now. But the amount of money in television around the world that's coming in, I mean, it's just ridiculous amounts. This is where clubs make their money. It's not through paying tickets to go and watch games. That's a drop in the ocean now, compared to TV money. But with the Champions League, it gets bigger and bigger, but then more attractive. And the bigger the teams, the more interested everybody around the world would be.
OK. Paul, thanking you tomorrow.
I will be in with a macassar tomorrow.
Yes, please.
Oh, yes.
Antimacassar's at the ready.
Oh, it's an antimacassar.
It's an antimacassar.
All right, so that means I won't with my anti. I'll just
never mind. I wish I'd never brought it up.
I'll do whatever. All right. Thank
It's your fault. You're the one who brought up the antimacassar.
I just thought everyone knew what an antimacassar was.
It's because we're talking granny chic a bit later on, and apparently things like antimacassars are coming back.
They are. Now, to politics, and the Conservative Party have announced a shared prosperity fund. It's worth a whopping £585 million. And it's going to be distributed to communities in Wales to support levelling up.
The funding will match that previously provided by the European Union, with the government proposing that it could be used to help fix regional disparities. This could include regenerating rundown high streets, fighting antisocial crime, and helping more people get decent jobs.
Well, let's talk to the Secretary of State for Wales, Simon Hart, who joins us now. Morning to you, Minister. Look, how is this going to work? How do you decide who gets what?
Well, it's a beginning of a sort of a new era of spending. I think it's actually great news. It's worked out on a sort of per head basis. It's designed to be particularly focused on challenged areas where the need is greatest. It will be much more evenly spread across the whole of Wales than under the old EU scheme. So areas of North Wales and Mid Wales, which have been previously sort of rather left behind in favour of Cardiff and the South East, will get a much bigger share of the cake than they ever have done before. And I think what's really important about this is we're going to be involving local authorities in the spending process much more again than has ever been the case before. You know, I'm very trustworthy of local authorities. They're at the coalface. They know their areas better than anybody, and they'll be able to bid into this system and be able to explain to the centre, if you like, if the UK government, the centre, what they need, when they need it, and how it's going to improve jobs, how it's going to improve our chances of hitting our net zero ambitions. So I'm really excited about the prospects that this has in store for Wales.
I'm sure there are a lot of people watching at the moment and listening to what you're saying, thinking £585 million. Is it really necessary to spend it on levelling up at the moment when actually we could all do with a handout to help us pay our fuel bills?
No, I completely get that, and 585 million is only this particular scheme. There are other schemes too. There's the actual levelling up fund. There's the money that central government provides Welsh government, which has gone up significantly over recent years, another £2.5 billion a year over the next 3 years. But I think levelling up and helping with the cost of living challenges are one and the same thing, because what we want to do is be able to provide really good job opportunities particularly for young people in Wales, so that they can pursue a career from start to finish without feeling the need to have to go away and earn their money, earn their living, pursue their dreams somewhere else. This is about having a really vibrant economy in every corner of Wales. It's about allowing people to get on the property ladder, and it's actually the stronger the economy, the better the job prospects, the higher the average wage, the more prepared we're going to be to deal with these the cost of living challenges, which are unquestionably heading our way, and which some cases have already hit us. So the two things are not disconnected.
I was intrigued, Minister, when you mentioned sort of some of this money, helping the net zero commitments and things like that. Now, look, I've got to be honest. You know, I'm all for net zero. I think, you know, as a sort of scientific principle, it makes absolute common sense. The problem is, it's an expense at the moment, which a lot of people say we shouldn't be touching on because of the other problems. Now, at what point do we have to say, yeah, it's a good goal, it's a good aim, but we just need to put it on the back burner for a couple of years?
Well, I don't think these things are necessarily always exclusive. Net zero is not only a sort of moral obligation as far as our climate change objectives are concerned. It's also a huge economic opportunity. It's got the potential to create 250,000 jobs in the UK, well-paid, high-tech, clean jobs in every corner of the UK. And in Wales, we're looking at the potential of a new floating offshore wind array in the Celtic Sea, which will be not only help achieve those aims, but will also provide a fantastic array of jobs across the whole of Wales and actually across the whole of the UK. In the clean energy sector, we're also looking at the potential of a large-scale nuclear plant up on Anglesey, and we're edging ever closer to that. Small modular reactors. So I think we can perfectly well maintain our net zero ambitions at the same time as addressing some of the cost of living challenges which are becoming talked about every day and in every part of Wales. As I say, I don't think those two things are exclusive at all.
As we introduced you, obviously you're a Tory, you're the Secretary of State for Wales. Who is to blame, in your view, for this grinding, slow, drip, drip, drip business of Partygate? We're all wondering, when is it going to end? Who would you blame?
Well, I mean, I'm probably, high on the list of people who wish it was going to end, to be honest with you, because I'd rather, not have to come here and, and face embarrassing questions about what happened back in May of 2020 and around that time. We could spend all day talking about who might be to blame for this, but the PM has held his hands up. He's accepted responsibility for what went on in Downing Street during that time. He's fixed the sort of machinery of Downing Street, which he said he'd do, and he also said that he would apologise. I've heard him apologise on numerous occasions. But the police inquiry grinds on, and the Sue Gray report, much talked about Sue Gray report, will eventually be published in its full and final form. And I think we're all hoping that we can reach that stage reasonably quickly and put this really difficult chapter behind us. I say I'm not going to try and sort of come up with a whole range of excuses or justifications. Misjudgments were made. Sometimes this happens. Punishments have been handed down in the form of fixed penalty notices, and I happen to be one of those people who think that it shouldn't necessarily follow that if you have a fixed penalty notice, you should also have to resign. So I'm a sort of on the liberal end of the scale as far as that's concerned. But I think your description of it as a long, slow grind, or however you expressed it, is exactly how it feels. And I ideally wish for the point from the point of view of the public that we could bring this to a conclusion. And I hate having to, as I say, come and keep talking about it, because it wasn't the most glorious chapter in our history.
Yeah. Okay, Minister, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much for that. Appreciate it. I'm increasingly of the opinion, and I wasn't necessarily before, but now increasingly of the opinion that let's just move on.
Yes.
Move on. Look, we've got the papers heading away in just a moment, so don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 7:48.
It is.
It is. Let's go through the papers. The political editor of The Sun on Sunday, David Wooding, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Morning. Liz, quick look at MP's safety in the Times. I mean, it's disturbing, this.
Yeah, the killer of the MP, David Amos, was convicted yesterday, and one of the things that he was sentenced for was intention to commit terrorist acts, and I didn't really know what that was when it was announced, but apparently he got 7 years. apart from the conviction for murder, for plotting to kill 2 other MPs. Michael Gove had been named before, and the other one is Tory MP Mike Freer, who had a lucky escape because on the day that Ali Harbi Ali planned to murder him at his constituency surgery, there was a change of plan, a late change of plan, and he didn't go in that day.
God.
But now he and all his staff wear stab-proof vests. I think it's really scary because how would you undermine a democracy? Either by killing democratically elected representatives, and there've been 2 stabbings of MPs, apart from the fatal one in Southend in the past few... No, sorry, there was the fatal stabbing of the Labour MP.
Well, she was shot, I think.
Shot, yeah. And there've been stabbings. Anyway, the thing
and I
is...
know Michael Gove has said it's absolutely traumatised his whole family.
Yeah, it would do. And somebody said to me, I mentioned this last week, I got... the nod, would you like to stand at the next general election, Liz, as an MP? And I said, actually, no, because I don't want
Isn't that a shame?
I don't want to put myself and my family in jeopardy. And it's bad because it undermines democracy if you can't get people to stand. And I think we should remember that when we're back.
And the constituency surgery was such an important part of being an MP.
And just wandering around town, shaking hands and going to social functions, it's terrible when we're in that kind of position. You don't have to invade with an army.
No.
You can just undermine confidence, in that way. It's terrible.
Well, he got a full life term, didn't he, anyway, yesterday?
Yeah.
Which is good. David, patient backlogs. We've been talking about the NHS all morning and the backlog of patients needing care.
Yeah, so what a lot of the papers have done, I picked on the Sun here, is specifics of the waiting list people having to put up with, which humanises a little bit. There's this one patient, the worst one in Britain, who's waited 6 years for ear, nose and throat treatment in West Suffolk hospitals. And then there's 80 people who've waited for 3 years for treatment and 24,000 who've waited more than 2 years. A lot of these people at the top of the list have waited for things such as hip and knee replacements. So their lives are being put on hold for a long time.
Can you imagine suffering with an ear, nose and throat problem that obviously needs help for 6 years?
It's a long
getting
time.
treatment.
A lot can happen. So you could have change of government in the.
Well, yes.
Well, several times over.
We've had 3 prime ministers in that time. Yes.
Yeah. Just very briefly, Liz, in the Telegraph, a no-fault divorce, because that's come into force.
Since it has, the applications for divorce have shot up, and people are obviously thinking, great, because you had to blame somebody, you had to be bitter, and you had to come up with reasons, and now you don't need all that. And I think that's great, because if you decide to part, what's it got to do with the state? You can't legislate for love. You can't force people to stay together. It was archaic, and I think it's a good thing.
OK.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it seems a bit sad that a sudden flurry for divorce. On the other hand, as you say, it could be liberating for people. So.
No. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know if I agree with it.
Well, get married first, and then you can think about it.
No, that's the last thing he wants to do when he gets married.
So, no, I'm definitely not thinking about it. Look, thank you both. We'll catch up a little bit later on. At 7:52, let's bring you up to date with the top stories. And Russia's admitted the flagship of its Black Sea fleet, the Moskva, has been seriously damaged, its crew evacuated after an explosion on board. Russia's defence ministry claim a fire on board caused ammunition to blow up. Ukrainians say they hit the cruiser with anti-ship missiles.
More than 5,000 migrants are thought to have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this year. 4,600 people have arrived in the UK from France on Tuesday, according to the Home Office data. And the Prime Minister is expected to say later that a further 600 migrants arrived yesterday, the highest daily total recorded so far this year.
And Prince William has hailed the game-changing Earthshot Prize, saying he thinks huge strides can be made in tackling the environmental crisis. He was talking to Kate Blanchard on a Climate of Change podcast, and he said he'd like to see more women-led and Indigenous community-led solutions to the problem. Now, yesterday, Anne was offended by an article in the paper that said interior design trends for the over 65s are changing.
But it was the way it wrote about people over 65, sort of, they're the people we consider have lace tablecloths and doilies and tea cosies.
And antimacassars.
And antimacassars and avocado bathrooms. And I was thinking, hang on a minute, I'm over 65 and I don't have an avocado bathroom and I certainly don't have an antimacassar.
But maybe you should, because Siobhan Murphy is an interior designer, says granny chic is bang on trend. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is it really?
Well, I mean, I don't really follow trends in terms of interiors. And I just think, like, my mum is 67, my grand's 87. Their houses are full of pink, leopard print, you know, all the, you know, blousy florals. And I just think no matter what age you are, decorate your home in a style that's joyful and that suits you. So regardless of what's on trend. But granny chic is still quite on trend.
So it's called... Let's figure out what granny chic is.
Yeah.
Right. So we talked about antimacassars, these the sort of doilies over the back of the sofa. Doilies themselves.
I don't think doilies are particularly.
They're not granny chic?
Well, I guess they are granny chic, but I don't know if they're like particularly on trend at the moment. But definitely the coloured bathroom suites are all coming back.
You're joking!
Absolutely. So the pinks, the avocado greens, literally they're so sought after at the moment. Everyone's thinking, right, you know, why not inject a little bit of colour?
Here's
in
a
your
good one.
bathroom?
What about paperweights? Nikki says, I love to put paperweights around the house. Not boring ones, but fun shapes and statues. And I even have a Robin Hood hat as a mini paperweight.
Why not? Why not? If you love a collection and you love paperweights, why not display them? Because I'm just all about...
You see, I think of collections as really untrendy, really bad, yeah.
No, I just think, look, we spend so much time in our homes, and even more so nowadays. If you've got a collection, then display it beautifully. You know, a curated collection of something is always going to be nice. And if that brings you joy in your home, let's do it.
Look, I mean, you look amazing at the moment. By the way, I love your hair. I've always wanted pink hair. But what's your home like?
So my home is very maximalist, very, very colourful.
Hang on, what's maximalist?
So maximalist is more taking the more is more approach to design. So, you know, more cushions, more beautiful...
That's your home?
Yep, this is my...
Oh, I love the mural. I think that's fabulous. That's not granny.
You see, it's not cluttered. Might be a maximalist, but it's
I don't know.
cluttered.
She's got a lot of cushions.
I have a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny that. I have a lot of stuff, but it's curated in a way that, for me, I don't think it looks too much, too over the top. And it's just what I like. You know, this is my home. I spend a lot of time there, and
do you leave your table like that during the day, or laid out?
That was styled for a shoot, but I must admit I left it like that for 3 weeks because I just couldn't take it down. I loved it so much.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you for that. I'll tell you, the only thing is, I always think about when you've got a lot of stuff out, it's a lot of dusting.
Yeah, it is true. But, you know, what's a few little grains of dust?
I've got to clear this one up because my friend has cushions on every chair, so much so, more cushions than we're seeing at the moment. There's nowhere to sit.
You've got to remove all the cushions. I mean, I think if I worked out over the years how much time I've spent taking all the cushions off the bed and then putting them back every morning.
Why do you do it?
It would be ridiculous.
See, that to me, that's granny.
That brings me joy. That brings me joy. I've seen all those cushions, and literally, my husband says, "What you do, Siobhan, is you take a usable space and then fill it with all this beautiful stuff, but make it unusable."
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, there is that.
So there is that balance of practicality and beautiful.
You know what I quite like though is the attitude, and it's one you get as well as you get a bit older, where you think, I don't really care what anybody else thinks.
Exactly. Throw that rule book out of the window. We've had so many rules, haven't we, over the years? So just do what makes you happy.
So whatever's on trend doesn't matter.
Absolutely. I don't follow trends. Like, literally, I just think... Sometimes if there's a trend that comes in and I think, oh, I like a little bit of that, but I don't follow trends because they go out of trends, don't they? They go out of fashion.
That's true. How about this one? Tyrone says, my nan loves to collect old books and display them. I don't think her or my granddad actually read them, but they do look nice on the shelf.
Perfect. If they look nice, you know, if it brings you a bit of joy, and every time you walk past that bookshelf you think, oh, there's my little collection. Why not? Why not?
I love it. I love it.
Well,
Siobhan...
you've talked Stephen into a bit of granny chic, but
yeah.
I'm much more minimalist than
I have actually got a couple of doilies. But they're ones that my great grandmother did, I think. So they're sort of old family things.
That's lovely.
So there you go. I like them because there's family stuff.
Yeah.
Siobhan, thank you. You're giving me hope.
Absolutely, and I still love your hair. Well, Jo, if you're listening on the radio, she has unbelievably long, bright pink hair.
Gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
Gorgeous. Right, we're out of time. We shall catch up with you at the top of the hour, so don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The number of people waiting for routine treatment on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5 people. That's according to new figures.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Dan.
And we're live on your TV, your radio and online. Here is what is leading the news for you this morning.
Well, the number of people waiting for routine treatment on the NHS could rise as high as 1 in 5, according to the latest modelling. The figure is currently 1 in 9, with some people waiting up to 4 years for surgery.
US President Joe Biden has announced another £600 million of military assistance to Ukraine. It comes amid reports of Russia stepping up activity in the east and south of the country.
The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, will today sign a 5-year deal with Rwanda to send some asylum seekers to the country to have their applications processed there.
And she's the ex-police detective responsible for jailing members of the Rochdale child sex abuse ring. As Greater Manchester Police publicly apologised to the victims this week, she'll tell why she's now dedicated her life to helping other survivors.
There's lots to talk about this morning, all the serious stuff, the NHS and what have you, but also we're talking first dates, we're talking granny chic, loads of you messaging in about that. So, I mean, quite literally, anything you want to talk about, we want to hear from you. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews. But our main news today, and the new figures show that the number of people waiting for routine surgery on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5.
The figure at the moment apparently stands at 1 in 9, with over 6 million patients currently waiting for non-urgent treatment. 23,000 of those are waiting more than 2 years, and a handful are waiting up to 3 or 4 years.
Now, many of the people on the backlog are likely to be in pain, of course, and that leads physicians warning that prolonged wait could lead to emotional and physical distress.
The figures lay bare the extent of the backlog crisis as COVID infections in the UK remain high, with an estimated 1 in 13 people infected.
Now, despite NHS leaders saying they're doing everything they can to mitigate the crisis, efforts have also been hampered by severe staff shortages right across the health service.
And the recent hike in national insurance, which came into force last week, is part of the government's plan to tackle the post-pandemic backlog. It was expected to raise £39 billion over the next 3 years. But there are reports out today saying, actually, that benefit has already been completely wiped out by the rising inflation, as announced yesterday.
Oh, so it does make you wonder what's going to happen next. Let's talk to our London reporter, Alice Porter, who's at Frimley Park Hospital in Surrey. Morning to you, Alice. I mean, it just seems remarkable that people going in and out of that hospital every single day are people who've been waiting for years for this treatment.
I know, these figures today, they're absolutely horrific, and they're the results of a Freedom of Information request which was sent to hospitals across England, and 69 responded, and that's what we've got the data today. And I think some of the striking figures show that at least 93 patients in England have been waiting for up to 3 years, and 9 have been waiting for at least 4 years. Now, if we look at Frimley Hospital behind me, just to kind of give an example, there's one patient had been waiting 2 years for care with a pain and management service at the NHS service here. Now, we know before the pandemic there were lots of people who were waiting, who were on waiting lists. There are about 4.5 million people who were waiting before the pandemic, and now the pandemic has hit, and that's made an extraordinary pressure that's put on services, and it's meant, unfortunately, that waiting lists have gone even higher.
And I say it's all-encompassing. It literally is every aspect of your life it affects. Work, I've had to become a home worker permanently at the moment, because there's just no way that I could manage to be in an office at the moment. My recovery is going to be a long one from this operation, because I had to wait so long, and because the operation had to be more or became more complex because of the length of time I waited. There is nothing that it hasn't touched. Nothing. Friendships, being able to socialise with friends. I can't remember the last time I went out with friends.
So that was Jo Goulding there speaking. She's been waiting for arthritis treatment for a couple of years now. But I think there's also been a huge amount of mental and emotional distress, as I think you got from that clip there. I mean, interestingly enough, I was actually speaking to my father about this, because he's a consultant that's been come out of retirement to help with the backlog and has been coming down every weekend to London hospitals. And that's one of the things that's really struck him as a consultant, is for patients to be waiting so long, often in pain. That's having an enormous impact on their mental well-being as well as their physical one as well.
Yes, and of course, conditions get worse when you're waiting. It's not just the pain that you're having to put up with, they can actually worsen. Obviously, all conditions should be treated as soon as possible to minimise that, but it's a terrible situation in the moment. Alice, thanks very much indeed for joining us there from Frimley Park Hospital.
Yeah, lots of people getting in touch about this one, actually, and it causes a huge amount of concern. Anita says it's the NHS being mismanaged from top to bottom causing a lot of these problems. Do they really need diversity managers?
Well,
I don't know. David said the NHS should and needs to go back to what it was originally designed for, i.e. basic medical care.
Yes, but where do you draw the line on that?
This is the problem. Everything else should be done privately with incentives to take out private medical insurance. Yeah,
but then we were talking to a doctor earlier who said that undermines the whole business of the health service, destabilises the health service, that's what he said.
But all your thoughts are very welcome. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is in Rwanda today to sign a 5-year deal with the country to outsource the UK's asylum process.
Now, under the new deal, people seeking asylum in the UK will be flown 4,500 miles away to Rwanda to have those applications processed.
This is part of the Prime Minister's plan to crack down on unauthorised migrants. He's going to announce it today, apparently. We're joined by our political correspondent, Tom Hardwood. Hello. It sounds on the face of it really quite alarming, the idea of rounding people up and flying them 4,500 miles to Rwanda for processing. But it's only going to happen to certain migrants, isn't it? And apparently other countries do this already.
That's right. Well, Denmark was one of the countries that first explored one of these options in terms of the countries in this part of the world. And also we know that offshore processing is a big part of the Australian migration system, or I should say asylum-seeking system. Really what we're looking at here is sort of working age males who are coming across in small boats will be the ones who are most flown off to Rwanda to be processed, obviously for this 5-year deal to see how this works to start with. But ultimately, what we see currently with those going across in small boats is a split. Some would say about 2/3 of those actually have their asylum granted and about 1/3 don't. But currently we don't really have the processes to deal with the third that don't. They end up staying in the UK. We don't have the deals with France, for example, to send people back. It's very tricky within the realms of international law in terms of what you do with people once they're in the country. So the idea is by having an international treaty with another country, a third country, whereby this stuff can be processed, we won't have this legal limbo of people stuck within the United Kingdom who haven't had their asylum.
So as soon as if they make it to Britain safely, they're rounded up and they'll be put on a plane, literally, almost straight away and sent to Rwanda.
That seems to be the plan as it stands. Obviously not all of those who come across, but many of those who...
Because apparently 9 in every 10 are people who actually do make it across are young males, and most of them single.
Certainly, and that's why people have a great concern, because there's a distinction, of course, between genuine asylum seekers and those who are economic migrants. And a lot of people are concerned that the big increase in people coming across, around 600 on small boats just yesterday, it's a huge increase in numbers, and many people are concerned that these numbers include people who aren't genuine asylum seekers, but who are looking to make a better life for themselves and are choosing to do a non-approved route to do so. I think one of the big aims of this scheme, which is being announced concurrently, Priti Patel will be in Rwanda and Boris Johnson will be down in Dover. It will be trying to incentivise people to apply through the proper systems, rather than coming across in dangerous ways with illegal gangs, risking their own life and limb on an incredibly treacherous stretch of water, the busiest shipping channel in the world.
But
the idea is to discourage
how much can we trust Rwanda to do a good job? When they don't exactly have a glittering human record, do they?
That's certainly true, and that's what a lot of people have been bringing up today. There's certain concerns with regard to how Rwanda particularly treats political prisoners. The criminal justice system in Rwanda is not one that is rated particularly highly around the world, although what the United Kingdom government would say in response to that is the deal that has been thrashed out and has been being worked on for quite some time. Of course, the option for offshore processing is a key part of the Nationality and Borders Bill that's currently going through Parliament. Is that there would be all of these safeguards within the deal. There would be legally binding international treaty law in order to ensure the good treatment of these people.
But if a big part of the problem is the number of people who come over who don't get granted asylum, but who then we can't send anywhere, what happens to them if they're not granted asylum and they're in Rwanda? Are they going to stay in Rwanda?
Well, then they would obviously be released, and I think that one of the arguments here is that Rwanda isn't necessarily a country that has as much economic opportunity as the United Kingdom, and so it wouldn't be so much of a problem in terms of people wouldn't really want to stick around. I think that's basically
so it's part of the disincentivising of them.
I think this is basically what the government's trying to get at. And now, obviously, there is a lot of criticism for this scheme. Lots of immigration lawyers say that it is inhumane, and indeed there is the argument the reason that small boat crossings have risen by such a large degree over the last few years is actually that the Calais situation has been more or less dealt with. We don't now see so many people coming across on lorries and on trains through the Channel Tunnel. So it's arguably a similar number of people in total coming across, but through different means. And so the question is, if you then shut down this other mean, will people find yet a different mean? Will people always be one step ahead of government restriction? Perhaps. Clearly a big debate to be had around this, although I think it's important to stress that in the opinion polls, this idea of offshore processing for people before they come to the United Kingdom is an incredibly popular one.
Yes.
And potentially this is why the government is so keen to pursue it in such short order.
Yeah, well, I can believe it. Tom, thank you very much indeed for that. Interesting. B's been in touch. Morning to you, B, who says that Australia, as Tom was saying, Australia did offshore immigration checks to illegal immigrants coming across the seas, and the numbers stopped completely. It's the only way it will stop. I mean, I haven't seen the figures on that, but, you know, you may well be right there, B, and if it does put people off, it is about people need to, if they're not following through the legal channels, then maybe this is, you know, as Tom says,
word will get round and maybe it will disincentivise them, or maybe they'll find another way of doing it.
Or why pay the smugglers thousands upon thousands of pounds to know that you're ultimately going to end up in Rwanda?
In Rwanda, yes. My goodness. Let us know what you think on that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We always like hearing your views.
We do.
Shall we bring you up to date then with today's other top stories? And, of course, dozens of NHS patients have waited more than 3 years, we're told, for hospital care in England. More than 6 million people are currently on the waiting list, with more than 23,000 waiting for more than 2 years to start routine treatment. Leading surgeons have described the data as shocking.
As we just heard, asylum seekers who cross the English Channel will be flown to Rwanda for processing under new government plans. Those seeking refuge in the UK but deemed illegal by the government will be flown to the East African country while their claims are assessed offshore. The Prime Minister will say in a speech later that action is needed to combat what he called vile people smugglers.
And people going away for the Easter weekend are warned not to, plan ahead anyway and leave plenty of time. The Department for Transport says it's working to minimise disruption, but they are advising travellers to allow extra time for their journeys. This follows flight cancellations this week and queues for even Channel ferry services.
Now, earlier this week, Greater Manchester Police issued an apology to victims of child grooming gangs in Rochdale for failing to protect them.
The Chief Constable, Stephen Watson, met with 3 of the victims to personally apologise to them. The gesture, however, comes a decade after the conviction of 9 men for sexual exploitation of children, and campaigners say that's 10 years too late.
Yeah, well, let's talk to Maggie Oliver, the former detective turned campaigner responsible for jailing the Rochdale child sex abuse. I mean, you're a whistleblower, in effect, in all of this. You were prepared to put your money where your mouth is, I guess we would say. That in itself, looking back at that, what made you suddenly say, actually, something's going wrong here, I've got to speak out?
Because it was wrong. If I'd been responsible for jailing these men, they'd still be in prison. They wouldn't have been walking the streets 2 or 3 years later after getting a 13-year-old child pregnant. So for me as a police officer, my job was to protect the vulnerable. And that is the job of every police officer, including chief constables. And I went to the top of Greater Manchester Police. I spent 18 months within the job saying this was wrong. It shouldn't be happening. These kids should be listened to. So the apology 2 days ago, I took 3 of the girls for that apology. It shouldn't have taken 10 years. I could have written those letters 10 years ago, because what is in those is what I was saying 10 years ago. And you don't need to be Albert Einstein to know that you shouldn't put a child on an indictment as one of a gang of paedophiles. You shouldn't let a man who got a 13-year-old child pregnant out of prison within 2 years. Those things are principles that I believed in, and I still do. But, you know, it's changed my life forever, as well as these girls. But on Tuesday, seeing Amber, who was, you know, represented in the drama, and Ruby, but particularly Amber, with that letter, seeing the look on her face that for the first time she has been publicly acknowledged as a victim that she was. That is worth the world to me.
See, that's what I find astounding, that up until that point, she's not been officially recognised as a victim.
It shocked me at the time. It shocks me still. And even though we've got this apology from Greater Manchester Police, which I am very grateful for, and I hope it's the start of a change of attitude and a change of culture. That's what I hope for. But the CPS, who were guilty, in my mind, for not charging these men with the correct charges...
What were they charged with? Initially, what were they charged with?
Well, they make a big song and dance that it was a successful case. Well, for me, a man who was raping a 12-year-old child and got her pregnant at 13 while we had a fetus, chose to charge that man with sexual activity with a child, not rape. That isn't justice. It's an easy option.
It's also astonishing that charge.
It shocked me, Anne, and it still does to this day. And the fact that they are still insisting today that they have done nothing wrong, that to me is shocking. And that is what lies behind the failure in rape prosecutions. Because with those kinds of attitudes and with the man at the top wanting to insist that they did nothing wrong on this case, that tells a lot.
But, I mean, presumably, even under the best of circumstances, that would be statutory rape. But never mind if you've got the child coming forward saying, you know, I was in no way consenting to this. I mean, how on earth?
A 13-year-old child doesn't consent.
You can't
anyway.
consent, and when they're drunk out of their mind. So you and I know that you don't have to be a police officer.
So why? Look, we know there are good police officers.
Yeah, there are.
We know they go through a training. We know most of them will probably be good human beings, you know, outside of their uniform. How can they make such fundamental errors?
It's not the individual police officers like me. I was a good police officer. This is about those at the top. I went to the top. I went to Peter Fahy and I said, this is not right. He fobbed me off. He wouldn't meet me. He.
Why? Why would he do that? Why wouldn't he?
Because it's an easy option. Charging a man with sexual activity with a child is far easier than charging them with rape. This was about resources. It was about a quick hit. It was about, you know, a public relations exercise. It wasn't about the individual victim. So for me, this is about those at the top. And the fact that Stephen Watson, who is the new chief, GMP went into special measures because they were failing victims on a monumental scale. They're still in special measures. So for me, it's better late than never. I hope that Stephen Watson is really going to be different than his predecessors, Ian Hopkins and Peter Fahy. And
well, doesn't this apology suggest that he probably is going to be different?
I always say I hope for the best and I expect the worst, because I'm 10 years into this journey. It's, in a way, destroyed my life. It's changed it forever. But this is a good moment where those three girls have actually had an apology.
Was racism or the fear of being called racist part of what went wrong here?
I think part of it was. And at the beginning of this journey, nobody would talk about the ethnicity or the religion of the offenders in the grooming gang cases. For me, it was never about ethnicity. I don't care if it's a priest in the Catholic Church. I don't care if it's Jeffrey Epstein. I don't care if it's Harvey Weinstein. For me, a 40 or a 50 or a 60-year-old man who's having sex with a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl is a criminal. He's a paedophile. And it's not the job of the police and the Crown Prosecution Service to tiptoe around that truth and that reality. So I've been accused of being racist. I am not.
Really?
Well, it was when I first...
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's ridiculous.
Because you were trying to get a gang of groomers.
Yeah, but I've grown a very thick skin through this journey, and I talk the truth. I don't care what people think about me. I am the voice of those girls, and I actually feel proud of myself that I've seen it through for 10 years, because this apology would not have happened without me. The Centre for Women's Justice have been phenomenal too, but it took me 6 or 7 years to get them to fight this case. We went to a previous legal firm who allowed time limits to expire. So that's why that's why I've started the Maggie Oliver Foundation, so that other victims and survivors have got somewhere to go for help and advice when they need it.
How does that work for you then, in terms of... Because I do a little bit of work with ex-offenders when they come out to try and help them.
Wow.
But when you're dealing with people who are talking to you about horrific things, even when it's the job, and obviously it's more than a job, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
That must affect you, hearing about all these horrors day in, day out.
For these three girls, for two of them in particular, that I was the one that Amber and Ruby put their trust in. I was asked by the most senior officers to gain their trust and give them commitments that we would support them. And looking into their eyes and knowing that I've let them down, that's why I resigned, because I gave my word. I was used, they were used until they were no longer useful. And actually, you know, knowing that I've done my best by these girls is my reward.
And that apology, because an apology is, I suppose, easy to make, and it's just a written apology or announced apology, but it did really mean something to them.
Massively.
That's good to know, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was sat next to Amber and Ruby and Daisy, and looking at Amber's face on Tuesday, she's going to frame that letter, because that is the first time that she's been acknowledged as a victim. I mean, the drama, Three Girls, showed how she was treated as a criminal. That's a girl who was locked behind 5 sets of metal doors, thought she was going to die, threatened at gunpoint to be shot if she spoke to the police. And despite all those threats, she spoke to me for months. And then the SIO, the Chief Constable, chose to drop her and then secretly put her on an indictment as one of the gang of paedophiles as a tactical option, so they could charge conspiracy.
As a tactical option?
A tactical option, yes.
I mean, this goes against, I mean, what is shocking is it goes against everything that we think the police should be doing.
It went against everything that I had devoted my life.
You know, if you've got kids, you say if something's wrong, go to a policeman.
Yeah.
If you're lost, go to a policeman.
Yeah.
A woman. But yeah, it does. It really offends. Those girls, young women now, how are they?
Relieved. It's been
Have they been able to rebuild build their lives?
I think it's always there in the head, knowing that this is hanging over them. That's why I'm angry it's taken 10 years to get an apology. But I hope it's the beginning of moving forward for them. For me, this journey continues. Their journey, well, Amber's journey, we're still challenging the CPS. That is still ongoing. The foundation, in a way, has taken over my life. But I've now got a fantastic team of almost 40 people. So I'm not on my own anymore either. They're not on their own. And survivors and victims who need help are not alone either. They can come to us for help, and we will do our best. And I believe that knowledge is power, and that there is strength in numbers, and we are not going anywhere. You know, we are going to stick with this until every victim has got a voice and not treated like these girls were, because it's still going on all around the country. An apology is really easy, like you say.
But if anyone's watching at the moment who hasn't seen the drama, it's called Three Girls.
Three Girls, all my book, Survivors, which talks about the Rochdale and my life a little bit, some of it.
Look, Maggie, I was going to say fascinating. It's more than fascinating.
It's chilling.
It's important.
It
really
is important
to talk to you.
Thank
and
you
for raising this. Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Value you letting me talk about it, because it's not gone away.
That's good.
No.
Well done.
You.
Thank you very much.
Do stay with us. We're going to be talking a bit later to Shadow Culture Minister Lucy Powell after this.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. We're live across the UK on both your TV and your radio.
Still to come for you this morning, as the Queen decides to ditch the traditional Maundy service today, we'll ask former royal correspondent Jenny Bond who will go in her place and how Her Majesty is going to be spending Easter.
And it's been 10 years since she won Britain's Got Talent. Ahead of the new series this weekend, Ashley Butler tells us how the talent show changed her life.
First, though, the Labour Party has attacked the Tories' failure to keep local communities safe as a shortage of bobbies on the beat leaves communities under patrol.
Staffing cuts have left the public with only one neighbourhood officer for every 2,500 residents, contradicting official tough-on-crime statements.
Well, the Labour Party has vowed to restore neighbourhood policing, setting up new neighbourhood police hubs. Easy for me to say, in all local areas.
Is it easy to do? Shadow Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, Lucy Powell, joins us now. Very warm welcome to you to the programme. Thanks for coming on. Bobby's on the beat. Is that really what we're talking about?
Well, it is. It's a very important issue. It'll be an important issue in the local elections that are coming up. It's one of those issues that constituents raise with me all the time. And it's palpable, I think, that people have seen a reduction in bobbies on the beat in their area, and it's a real cause of concern. And as you say, figures that we've publishing today show how much more stretched neighbourhood police officers are being. You know, they used to cover patches of about 1,500 residents, and now they're having to cover about 2,500 residents instead, so per officer. So, you know, they are being really stretched.
How you think you're going to tackle this in a sense of a big influx of officers, of new officers, and the sort of training involved is one of the criticisms that's been really laid at the feet of Dame Cressida Dick following her resignation. People saying there haven't been enough checks. That's been part of the problem as to certainly all the issues within the Met. So, I mean, you can't simply turn around and say, can you, well, we're going to rush through as quickly as possible a whole load of new recruits.
Well, as you say, it does take time, and we've seen police numbers go down by around a quarter over the time that the Conservatives have been in government. A quarter. That's supposed to be the party of law and order. But we are seeing in some places now, especially where we have Labour police and crime commissioners, new recruits coming through and numbers starting to go back up again. But it does take time, you're absolutely right. But we want to see a focus on that police hub model of neighbourhood policing. You know, that's absolutely at the heart of the policing model, is to have very strong and consistent neighbourhood policing as well, because we're seeing such a fast turnover of officers, as well as fewer officers covering the beat, and so they're not able to get to know their communities, get to know people, be able to draw that intelligence from what's happening on the ground, which is absolutely critical in terms of law enforcement, but also prevention.
I mean, it's interesting that the Labour Party is now calling for this. You're making the case right now, and the May elections are coming up. And you're absolutely right. Whenever MPs and candidates are canvassing, it's almost the first thing people say to you, isn't it? We want more. We want a visible police force. Do you think that the Tories doing their canvassing as well for the elections, do you think they'll hear that message?
Well, yeah, it comes up on the doorstep. You know, that's why the two big issues that we're talking about in relation to these elections and what's happening in the country is the cost of living crisis facing people, you know, energy bills, food bills, other bills going through the roof and taxes going up as well, all the while sort of wages are stagnating, and law and order and antisocial behaviour, because these are the issues that people are talking about. They're what's on the doorstep. Usually you get a bit of bins and fly tipping as well in those conversations too. But these are the issues that matter to people. And, you know, we just don't feel that the government is focusing on those. We've got a Home Office in absolute crisis at the moment, you know, failing on all fronts, whatever you look at in terms of what's happening in the Home Office. And you've got a Prime Minister that's now found to guilty of his own law breaking. So they can hardly be the party of law and order when they're being fined for law breaking on their own premises as well. It sort of makes a mockery of our criminal justice system, really, that the Prime Minister thinks he can stay in office having been found guilty of breaking the law.
Well, talking of the Home Office, the Home Secretary's in Rwanda today. They're obviously signing this deal to put illegal asylum seekers to have those applications processed offshore, as it were. What do you make of this from Pat, who's just emailed in this morning? Morning to you, Pat. She says processing illegal immigrants in Rwanda is the best thing the government has done so far and a very brave move. As a Labour supporter, I will now consider voting for the Conservatives at the next election. We need more brave and bold decisions like this from our government. Labour would never have done this. Would you?
Well, the reason we wouldn't do it is because it's unworkable, it's incredibly expensive, and it won't do what the government say it will do, or what your viewer thinks and hopes that it might, unfortunately. So it's one of those things that sort of sound good, and it's sort of pleasing to voters and the public in some sections of the voters and the public in those circumstances, but actually won't work. And you know, it's very, very expensive. A similar scheme in Australia was found to have cost £1.7 million per person, per asylum seeker. And so there are much more effective ways of us dealing with this appalling situation of people being exploited and trying to come across the channel to get to this country. There are far more.
Forgive me for jumping in, but in the case of Australia, didn't it significantly reduce the number of people trying to claim asylum?
No, it didn't. And you know, there's no evidence to show that this model would work. And you know, one of the reasons let's just not forget here that the Conservative Party have been in power for 12 years. Boris Johnson and Priti Patel have been running our borders now for nearly 3 years. And in that 3 years, the number of boat crossings coming across the channel has increased tenfold.
Which is why they're coming up with the scheme. Which is why look, we're running out of time, Lucy Powell. Thank you very much for joining us. But, I mean, you get views on everything on either way. Robert has said you can put boat migrants in a big unpleasant camp or send them to Rwanda. Either way, the lefty lawyers will kick up a stink and block it. And we're going to see that next.
Let us know what you think. I mean, Lucy Powell admitted there that it's a vote winner, if you like, but she just says it just isn't feasible, doesn't work, and is very, very expensive. Well, you know, when it comes to these sort of things,
it's expensive to keep people here as well, and it's going to go, and it's also expensive on people's human lives if they're risking their lives just across the channel. In small boats.
But I tell you what, this is why when you get all these announcements, you need to dig through the figures. You need to work out what is really going on and then see what you think. But it's interesting. You know, Priti Patel, some would say, has got to do something. Lucy Powell says it's not the right thing. Let us know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Do stay with us. We're going to go through the papers in a few moments with Liz Kershaw and David Wooding after this.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 8:39. Very good morning to you. Let's go through the papers for you today with political editor for The Sun on Sunday, Mr. David Wooding, and broadcaster Miss Liz Kershaw. Good to see you both this morning.
Yes, indeed.
David, robot jobs in the Telegraph.
Well, we're all replaceable. I've been looking through here for journalists and TV presenters, and we're not on the list. But it seems that robots can do any job imaginable. And there's this university professor who's done in Switzerland, who's done a test of 1,000 jobs and worked out which ones are easy to replace by robots and which are not. At the top end of the safe jobs, you've got surgeons and those sort of jobs. You know,
well, they still have to be done by humans.
I would have thought with that artificial intelligence technology, surgery could be done more by robots than it was. But apparently, a surgeon, you need the human contact.
Yeah,
but the jobs which are at risk, the ones that are at risk mostly are fashion models. The jobs can be done by robots. So robots down the gangway.
I'm all for that. Well, not that I watch fashion shows, but I never understand why these fashion models and your Kate Mosses and your Naomi Campbells, why they're mega stars and so unbelievably wealthy just because they parade clothes down a catwalk.
And why they always look so miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole look of the supermodel is misery, isn't it? Hate it.
So
Robot
no more
would be
miserable.
better.
You'll have
Who else
Robert
could
the
be
Robot.
replaced by robots?
Postal workers, meat packers, groundsmen, sewing machine operators, plasterers.
Plasterers?
Yes, plasterers.
I'm surprised about that.
Do you have a robot delivering your...
Oh, we have robots do the
robots
do
at
the
Milton Keynes.
little they drive around from the co-op.
Yeah.
Little robots.
Sorry, say this again. Little robots from the co-op.
Yeah, so you order your stuff online and it turns up outside your gate in a little robot machine.
All over Milton Keynes, you see these little robots going along, and they're dead clever. They stop at the edge of the curb, don't they? And then they kind of look both ways, and then they carry on.
Oh, I love that. That's worth moving to Milton Keynes for.
We'll send you a picture.
Yes, please do. I'd love to see that.
I tell you what, they were great during lockdown when you weren't meant to go out and you just said, I need a loaf of bread and a pint of milk.
How do they announce themselves to you?
It comes up on your phone saying your robot's outside.
And you go, and
then you go outside, and then you have to say, my robot is here, and the lid pops up.
Oh, so
take your
nobody else could take your shopping.
Nobody can mug a robot.
No. Put the lid back down and then say, send it away, and then it off runs
love
off
it. And is it? Does it go along the pavement? Or
Yeah.
And does it bump into people, or is it intuitive?
No, it's got sensors.
Got sensors.
Yeah.
I like the sound of
They're
that.
brilliant. They are really brilliant.
We're living in a different century from us.
I know. I've got it here.
Milton Keynes, it's
Well, it
the
is.
future.
It is the future.
Football sexism, Liz, in the Sun.
Yeah, well, there's this footy boss, and he said that the female players, if they, lose a goal to the other side, then there'll be a quick succession of more goals because they can't cope with the disappointment and the stress, and they're too emotional and they cry. Anyway, I just thought this is rubbish. But you know why? Because I've had a life in music, as I have presenting it. I thought to myself years ago, it's actually the men that write the sloppiest songs. So you think, men are heartless, but actually, if you think about the finest love songs,
yes, they're
Prince, Nothing Compares to You, or the Nielsen song, Achilles.
Oh yeah, all right.
They're all written by men. Men are softies, is what I want to say.
But who became the most famous footballer in the country for a good long while for crying?
Gaza.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have to confess, I think probably the last time I cried was at a football match.
But men do get very worked up about their football, don't they?
Maybe it was the drink, or maybe it was the persuasion.
So basically,
emotional, David.
He's offended female players for saying that, but actually he's wrong anyway, isn't he?
I think so, yeah.
David, tell us about the dog's dinner.
Dogs. Well, vegan dogs. It's catching on. Veganism among dogs now. Give the dog a bone, I was always told. Well, no, give it some carrots and things. Well, look, there's a study by a professor at Winchester University which looked at 2,500 dogs, and the 13% which were fed a vegan diet were a third less likely to have any problems. That only matched dogs that were given a raw meat diet, but the problems with raw meat diets is they're more likely to get worms and so forth. So they found that dogs that were fed a vegan diet are healthier, less problems than dogs that are fed traditional meat. Now, there's a rider with this, a health warning, a proper health warning, is that you have to give dogs supplements as you would if you were a human having.
So if you're going to give them a vegan diet,
you have to be careful. You can't just give them kale and bananas and carrots.
Although you can give them kale and bananas and carrots.
But you have to watch what you're doing. You have to study it and do it properly. It's no point just.
My doggy likes a banana.
But that would be.
He likes carrots as well, as long as they're thinly sliced.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But dogs are supposed to tear meat apart, that's why they've got canines.
Yeah.
But I don't know about this because my brother's dog got me glasses on Saturday. So, plastic diet.
I can't. I mean, I'm a lifelong vegetarian. I can't imagine feeding a dog a vegan or a cat a vegan diet.
Well, you would. You're probably going to be vegan yourself, aren't you?
Yes, I would have
so it's probably quite easy to adapt the dog's diet, and maybe they're more healthy because they've got owners who are putting such a lot of thought into their diet in the first place.
Yeah, but don't do it on a whim. Then just don't do it on a whim.
No, you couldn't do it on a whim.
And a whole new meaning to that looks like a right dog's dinner.
Yeah.
As we say.
And you couldn't write a note to your husband saying, your dinner's in the dog.
Or to the teacher.
Unless it was a vegan.
My dog ate my homework.
That's right, dog ate vegan. Yeah. I'd like to hear what stupid things your dog has eaten, please. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Molly, what about a bit of healthy eating for the rest of us?
Yes, apparently if you want to live longer, this is breaking news, isn't it?
Yeah.
You should have a Mediterranean diet.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's what we say.
Rich in green leafy vegetables and berries, no fast or fried food, at least 2.5 hours of physical exercise every week, don't smoke, hardly drink, and do crosswords. And you'll add about 2.5 years to your life.
But how many years do you take off your life very quickly, David, if you have that Easter egg that you were going to...
Oh, yes.
no, is this Liz? You were going to tell us about
No, that's David's contract. Because what we were saying, we eat healthily and, we're not overweight and we do this and we do that. And then he says, but you smoke. And I said, well, yeah, so... 2.5 years less sat in a care home, dribbling into my own chest, and having to have my nappy changed.
That's one way of looking at it. There's a thought, Liz.
Well, or have a deep-fried Easter egg. Go on.
There's a chain in Cleethorpes in Lincolnshire where they're selling deep-fried Easter eggs. Big Easter egg filled with Smarties, covered in batter, special recipe, deep-fried at 180 degrees. Apparently it's the mixture of the savoury and the sweet. But, I mean, I've never fancied a deep-fried
chocolate
margot.
Easter egg. Deep fried.
They also do deep-fried cream eggs, if you've got a smaller appetite, and Colin the Caterpillars.
Yeah, whole Colin the Caterpillar cake from Marks and Spencer's in batter.
I'll tell you what, I'd try, though I like the sound of an Easter egg stuffed to the brim with Smarties. That sounds very appealing. But I would try, I'd try a cream egg deep fried, just to try it.
There we are.
You never know, it might be nice.
Rich and gooey enough. Deep fried as well.
I won't be having any chocolate this weekend. I don't like it.
No, me either. I
don't like it?
Don't understand people.
I don't. It's like chewing a
like
candle. It's all waxy and horrible.
David?
A little bit of chocolate, dark chocolate.
Dark
Oh,
chocolate.
no, that's even worse.
Oh, no, I like a bit of milk chocolate and white chocolate.
But cheese. Cheese.
Cheese.
Yeah.
Deep fried cheese, then, Anne.
You might have seen me, I enjoy a little bit of cheese.
You do, yeah, you do. I remember that.
We had cheese guests in one day and I couldn't just... You had to do all the talking,
It
I
was
couldn't
wonderful.
stop eating.
It was wonderful. I took it all home.
It was brilliant.
This pyramid one is still in my fridge.
Is it?
I haven't figured out what to do with it. Apparently it's fine. You know, as with all cheese, it just sits there.
Oh, just
until
get
you
it
eat
eaten.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I might go home and have it today.
Lovely, thank you both. Liz
Thank you
Kershaw,
so
David
much.
Wooding, good to see you.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
It's gorgeous outside
If you can
now.
get anywhere this Easter, well done you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shall we bring you up to date with today's top stories? Russia has admitted the flagship of its Black Sea fleet, the Moskva, was seriously damaged and its crew evacuated after an explosion on board. Russia's defence ministry say that it was a fire on board that caused ammunition to blow up, but Ukrainian officials say they hit the cruiser with 2 anti-ship missiles.
Prince William has hailed the game-changing Earthshot Prize, which is his own, I think, isn't it? Saying
Yes,
he thinks
it is.
huge strides can be made in tackling the environmental crisis. He was talking to Kate Blanchett on a Climate of Change podcast. The Duke of Cambridge said he'd like to see more women-led and more Indigenous community-led solutions to repairing the planet.
It's a funny thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah, self-praise is no praise at all, Your Highness. Is my view on that one.
OK, you've brought him up. The Royal Maundy service will happen today at Windsor Castle, but Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the Queen will not be in attendance and she's going to be represented by Prince Charles. For more on this, former royal correspondent Jenny Bond joins us now. Hello there, Jenny. Hi. Hello. Nice to see you. I was just explaining to Stephen that you and I were on a canal boat making a TV series for about 8 weeks, I don't know. But anyway, let's talk about the Maundy service. Can you remind us what it is about, the Maundy service? And the Queen has always done it in the past, hasn't she?
She has. It's one of those events in the diary she really likes to keep. She has missed it actually 4 times, twice because she was abroad and twice because she was either pregnant or just had a baby. It's a service at which she likes to, well, by tradition, she hands out a nosegay, it's called, first of all, a little bouquet of flowers, but it's more particularly Maundy money, Maundy Thursday money. It's a commemorative bunch of coins, most of which are collectibles. I think they have some real value too. And it's to mark the, well, it's the symbol of when Jesus Christ washed the feet of various disciples and people. It's a community service, and so it's members of the community who've done good works who are invited along on this occasion to St George's Chapel in Windsor, and the monarch greets each of them.
Yeah, which is presumably something which is partly the problem here, because it's how many would it be this year? 102 or something she'd have to greet, which is it's going to make it a full day event pretty much, isn't it?
Exactly that, yeah. It is as many people as her age. She's about to be 96, so there'll be 96 women and 96 men. Now, that's a big event, so it's quite a long ceremony. It's a lot of standing on your feet, and it gets longer every year. It hasn't actually taken place for the last couple of years because of the pandemic, but it's just too much for her. You know she's got mobility problems. She's a little bit frail. The spirit is willing, but the body is a little bit weak. And so she took the decision not to go ahead with this a few days ago.
We're going to see more and more of this, I guess, aren't we? Prince Charles beginning to take on those monarch, the king or queen's role.
Yeah, I mean, we are witnessing the transition, really, of many of the responsibilities of monarchy. She is not going to abdicate, in my view, unless something really drastic happens, and she loses perhaps her mental powers. But, you know, thanks to modern technology, she can continue to reign and to be in touch and to interact with people because of technology like this. She can do it remotely. And she's enjoying that, I think. She wants that contact with people. So that's what we're going to see. This is the pattern of the future. And I think the palace is being very, very wise in announcing the events she won't make in advance, because otherwise we'll get in a terrible tiz about it, don't we, if it happens on the day, and we're very good at getting in a tiz. So they're stopping that.
Yes, and of course with the Platinum Jubilee celebrations coming up, she will want to do at least some of them. So I suppose in a way she's just sort of reserving her energy.
I think she is conserving her strength, as she did before the Thanksgiving service for the Duke of Edinburgh. We didn't see her in public. She cancelled 1 or 2 engagements we thought she might make, and she did manage to make it to that service. And there's a heck of a lot coming up. This is the beginning of the royal season, if you like. It starts with the Windsor Horse Show, which is next month. She could make that because she could just be driven from the castle into the grounds, and she could watch some of the events from the car. And that's an informal gathering anyway, really. The Chelsea Flower Show, she loves to go there, but I'm not sure she will be mobile enough to do that. And then the Platinum Jubilee, of course.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Chelsea Flower Show is a walk, isn't it?
It is a
lot
walk.
of walking.
I always a bit surprised, Jenny, when people are surprised that the Queen is a bit frail and this great panic comes up. I mean, when you look at her age, I mean, she might be frail, she might be struggling with mobility, but it's still remarkable for someone of her years.
I know, but I think it's something about the fact that she's just been there for all of us in the background of the national fabric of our lives, hasn't she? She's just been there. And I think we've all come to believe she's somehow immortal. Clearly she is not. She is a very old lady now, and in surprisingly good health, really, for someone of her age. I think the problems are mobility, back pain, a little unsteady maybe on her legs, hence the walking stick. And she's just got to take sensible decisions with the advice of her doctors, I'm sure, that she has to recognise her frailty and design her life accordingly. And that's what she's doing. But she's not going to give up.
No, I quite agree.
No, she won't. Look, Jenny Bond, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye-bye.
I love the Queen. I love the Queen.
I do, and honestly, I was at this concert the other night and we sang the national anthem at the end, and the whole of the Royal Albert Hall, everybody stood and sang their hearts out. And I thought, it was just brilliant, and there was such a strong feeling for her, and the fact that one day we will lose her, and that's a horrible thought because she is so loved.
She is. She certainly is. I'll tell you who else is loved today. We're talking to Maggie Oliver, the former detective who was a whistleblower, really, on the whole Rochdale grooming scandal, and there was an apology issued to some of the victims 10 years on. Patricia's been in touch this morning after watching Maggie on the show, saying, I've watched this lady fight over the years and there's only one word to describe her, brave. She should have been recognised years ago for her bravery in taking on the establishment to help these girls. God bless her. And it's people like Maggie Oliver who change the world, I think.
Yes, she literally has made a huge change for women and for girls, and actually in the police as well. She's shaken things up, as all good whistleblowers should. Marge says, I've got a few glass turtles in my house that I got from my aunt. They've been around for so long the glass has dimmed, but I think they look nice. Does that count as granny chic?
Yes, it does, Marge. But good on you. Stick with it. If you like them, why not? Yeah. Stay with us. Top stories coming up.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit misty and murky out there for many today, but it is going to brighten up and it's going to get a bit warmer as well, not just today, but actually as we head into the Easter weekend. Low pressure clearing away to the east, another one out west, but that's only making slow progress towards us. Generally, we're sitting under a little ridge of high pressure, which will bring most of us a fine dry day today. It is quite grey and murky out there first thing, a lot of mist and low cloud in the south. It'll take a while to clear. Thicker cloud too for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. A little bit of rain here and there, certainly for the Western Isles, could be quite damp. But otherwise, it's generally dry. Skies will tend to brighten. Some good spells of sunshine over northeast England and brightening up across South Wales, southern England as well. Well, we could reach 20, maybe 21 Celsius. Generally, temperatures in the mid to high teens. Still a bit cooler across Western Scotland, where there will be that thicker cloud and a bit more rain just trickling in to the far west of Scotland, particularly the Highlands through this evening. Rain edging away from the north of Northern Ireland, so for many it becomes dry and clear. Again, turning a bit misty and murky, especially along the south coast, and temperatures dropping down into single figures. On to Good Friday, and for most it's a fine-looking day, dry and bright. There will still be some patchy rain across northern Scotland, maybe a few showers across Shetland, certainly early on. The threat of cloud increasing further west. We may just see 1 or 2 showers developing during the afternoon, but for many places it's a brighter day on Friday, better chance of seeing some lengthier spells of sunshine. And it will be feeling warmer once more. Temperatures more widely into the high teens, perhaps into the low 20s across the southeast. Some coasts will be cooler, particularly if it's misty and murky around the southwest or on the east coast of England with the breeze from the sea. Into the long weekend, many places will be dry, certainly for the first few days, and quite warm when the sun's out. We are going to see a change to cooler, more showery weather for Easter Monday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The number of people waiting for routine treatment on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5 people. That's according to new figures.
Good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of April, and this is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Dan.
We're live on your TV, your radio and online. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The number of people waiting for routine treatments on the NHS could rise as high as 1 in 5, according to the latest modelling. The figure is currently 1 in 9, with some people waiting up to 4 years for surgery.
US President Joe Biden has announced another £600 million worth of military assistance to Ukraine. This comes amid reports of Russia stepping up activity in the east and south.
The Home Secretary will today sign a 5-year deal with Rwanda to send some asylum seekers to the country to have their applications processed there.
And he's swapped wrapping for nappies. Professor Green tells us why losing his own dad at a young age has changed the way he views fatherhood.
Anything you want to talk about, as always, you know this by now. We want to hear your views. gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Now, our top story today, new figures show that the number of people waiting for routine surgery on the NHS could rise to 1 in every 5 people. It is currently 1 in 9.
Oh, well, let's talk to our London reporter, Alice Porter, who's at Frimley Park Hospital in Surrey. I mean, tell us more about these waiting times, Alice, because, I mean, the predictions over the next 2 years are looking pretty grim.
Yeah, they really are. These figures that have come out today, they're the result of a Freedom of Information request which was sent to hospital trusts across England, and 69 responded. And of those ones which responded, it revealed that 93 people have been waiting for at least 3 years for treatment in England, and 9 people have been waiting for almost 4 years for treatment. And to just give one example, somebody has been waiting for up to 2 years for care management with a care management service here at Frimley Park NHS Hospital. So that just gives an example there. Now, we know before the pandemic there was already an issue in England with very high waiting lists. There was about 4.5 million people who were waiting for treatment on the NHS. That has now gone up so much because of the pandemic, and the concern is that backlog is not getting any smaller.
For people who are having to have these long waiting times, what sort of effect is it having on them?
I think it's having an enormous effect. I mean, when these figures were revealed, a number of leading surgeons have spoken of their shock and saying that this is going to have an enormous emotional distress on patients. I was actually speaking with my father about this because he came out of retirement to help with the backlog. He's a consultant, and something he said to me a number of times is the impact this is having on people's mental health because of the discomfort they're in. If we look at the number of people who've been waiting the longest, about a quarter of those are waiting for trauma or orthopaedic care, so people waiting perhaps to have a hip replacement or a knee replacement, perhaps because of arthritis. And I think that gives an indication there of the sort of discomfort that somebody would be in. Now, Jo Goulding, she's one of the people who's been waiting for treatment for 4 years. She's got rheumatoid arthritis. This is what she has to say about how the wait has impacted her life.
And I say it's all-encompassing. It literally is. Every aspect of your life it affects. Work, I've had to become a home worker permanently at the moment because there's just no way that I could manage to be in an office at the moment. My recovery is going to be a long one from this operation because I had to wait so long, and because the operation had to be more or became more complex because of the length of time I waited. There is nothing that it hasn't touched. Nothing. Friendships, being able to socialise with friends. I can't remember the last time I went out with friends.
Oh, it's so sad, and you can understand her pain.
Oh, it's awful, isn't it? I mean, she looks as though she's in a lot of discomfort. Look, there is this huge backlog, Alice. What's the NHS trying to do to solve that, to clear it somewhat?
Well, NHS leaders saying they're doing all they can to get through the backlog, and back in February they announced their recovery plan, which had a number of schemes, including people going to hospitals which were further away, but they'd be able to be seen quicker. But what we're hearing from surgeons within the NHS is because COVID is still a big problem, with people still having to take time off. If you are working for the NHS, if you're involved within the healthcare, if you test positive for COVID, even if you don't have symptoms, you still have to isolate for 5 days, and that is still having an enormous impact on hospitals across the UK. So I think the worry is, while there may be a number of initiatives to tackle the crisis, I think the worry is that still, with COVID still being such a big problem across the country, that it's still going to be impacting the NHS for many months and years to come.
Well, Alice, thanks very much indeed. Thanks for outlining the human stories really behind today's awful figures.
That's what we need to focus on, isn't it? It's the individuals who are really struggling with all of this. Let's bring you up to date with some of the top stories. And asylum seekers who cross the English Channel will be flown to Rwanda for processing under new government plans. Those looking for refuge in the UK but deemed illegal by the government will be flown to the East African country while claims are assessed offshore. The Prime Minister is expected to say that action is needed to combat what he's called vile people smugglers.
Justice Minister and Tory peer David Wolfson has resigned, citing the most recent Partygate fines. The minister said he had no option than to quit over what he calls the repeated rule-breaking in Downing Street. The Prime Minister has already paid one fine and has conceded that more are probably going to follow.
And people going away for the Easter weekend are being warned to plan ahead or stay at home.
Yeah.
The Department for Transport says it's working to minimise disruption, but they're advising travellers to allow extra time for their journeys. There are flight cancellations, queues for Channel ferry services, and we expect about 30 million people on the roads this weekend at some point or other.
Do you go out there and even try?
Nope. I mean, 30 million people on the roads. And I think that affects, we almost talk about that the least, but that's probably going to affect the most people.
Yes,
I would
it
have
is.
thought.
But the very idea, you arrive, you're looking forward to a holiday, you arrive at the airport, and you know what it's like. You walk into and then you see the queues, and the queues aren't moving. That's the other thing.
I've never been in a situation where, I mean, sometimes it's taken half an hour maybe, but the queues move. I've never been stuck in an airport like that for hours.
I have, just recently. And it was
that bad?
Yeah, it was that bad. It was absolutely terrible. So much so that there were, you can tell the sort of feisty people in the queue. There are some, actually, usually the ladies who get so fed up with it that they say, hang on a minute, I'm going to go off and find somebody. And, this lady disappeared down the hallway at Heathrow, and she came back with this guy who looked terrified.
Oh, I bet he was.
And he had one of these walkie-talkies, and she said, now tell them to open more people. And she said, this queue isn't moving. And he sort of gone, and then he rabbited away. Never came back.
No,
so she went off
blame
after him again, and she was trying to get things moving, and it was just horrendous. It went on for about 3.5 hours.
You see, but what can you do? If they haven't got the staff, then what can you do? You can't magic them out of nowhere, can you? I don't know. If you've got any horror stories, let us know. Although we're just about getting ready to finish at 9:30, get your thoughts through ready for tomorrow as well. About go through
because
them
we'll
in a
still
bit
be
more
talking
detail.
about it. It's Good Friday tomorrow, isn't it?
We certainly will. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Well, look, whether you're heading away on holiday for Easter or spending time with your family at home, the pressure is on for parents who may need a little bit of inspiration for how to keep them busy, basically, and quiet.
We're joined by the founder of the Unlikely Dads Club, the rapper Professor Green, who thinks he can help. Let's find out. Morning, Stephen. It's good to see you this morning. Look, do you count yourself then as an unlikely dad?
I think we all feel a bit unlikely. I think fatherhood has really progressed for a lot of us. I think we're perhaps the first generation that speak as openly as we do about things and share things that men didn't perhaps talk about that often before. And we're a bit more hands-on, I feel. At least more open about being more hands-on. And with being more hands-on means we're more likely to, as we're finding our way through things and learning how to do things, make some more mistakes, which does make us a bit unlikely or feel a bit unlikely at times.
How long have you been an unlikely dad? In other words, how old is your little boy now?
My little boy is a year and almost a year and a month. Yeah, and he's progressing rapidly. He's now climbing over everything. He's without going into too much detail, he's just getting bigger in every way, and everything is bigger, which puts you at risk of bigger messes. And the phrase that's been coined,
what are you talking about?
So what's your advice to those dads watching and families watching who need a little bit of inspiration, especially if they've got a very young one? What could they do that's just nice this Easter weekend?
Do you know what's nice is being prepared. So just keep them as comfortable as possible. So my advice to all fathers is preparation, plan, pack. Make sure you've got your Pampers, make sure you've got spare clothes, make sure you've got dummies, make sure you've got bottles, everything's sterilised, and everything will be all right. Just plan and be prepared for potential tsunamis. That was quite a lot of information.
Was that something that surprised you? When your little boy came along, was it something that surprised you, just how much stuff you need for one baby?
It's insane. Like my nan just kept buying us, she just kept giving us, what do you call them?
Baby grows.
The little, no, not baby grows, baby grows, but also the little towels. And she just kept one more.
Bibs?
No, not bibs, I forget but just the muslins, there we go, sorry, thank you. It's been a while since I've had to use one because he's not being sick now. I don't have to burp him anymore. He does that all by himself, bless him. But we've given him a habit because me and his mum, because we laugh when he burped. Sorry, because we used to laugh when he burps, he now burps and just goes, and he does the same thing when he has other accidents as well, which is all the more traumatic.
Do you know that doesn't stop?
No, but
it goes on for years, that does.
No, thanks. Wicked. I'm really glad to hear. Do you know what's funny, right? And this is the other thing about the Unlikely Dads Club is it's a bit like a truth club because no one really tells you the full, no one gives you the full breakdown of what it's like to have a kid. No one tells you all that they tell you about. And I wrote a song actually for Pampers that it goes into it. It's like everyone tells you about, the first tooth, the first smile, the first step. No one tells you about the first punami, the first puke, all the things that actually happen that you're like, what do I do? No one's told me about this. Where's my mum? Like no one tells you about all the less pleasant details, which would never stop you having a kid, of course, but I think it's just good to have somewhere that people...
Those are the bits that you never forget, those
ones. It's all part... Go to find out all the gory details and be truly prepared.
I have to say, we first met at Goodwood for the car event. I remember, it might be 7 or 8 years ago now. It's quite a long time ago.
I was there with Mercedes.
Yeah, that's it. And it was... I have to say, you were a nice, jolly fella then. You seem more complete now. You look like you've got an inner glow to you.
Thank you. I definitely feel it. It was funny because I never wanted anything to do with anyone else's children, but I knew I always wanted at least one of my own. And I still don't have the words for it. People ask me what it's like, and it's the one thing that I struggle to explain. People say you don't know until you have your own, and you truly don't.
Yeah.
It was. I do want to, because what I think has been quite brave over what you've done over recent years, and you've talked about losing your dad at 24 to suicide. You've talked about mental health a lot. You've made documentaries about it and all the rest of it. Where does that leave you looking forward? Now that you've got a boy to raise, how are you determined now that you are going to be a strong dad, of course, but also an open dad as he gets older?
Yeah, definitely, and it threw up challenges for me. I'll be honest about that. Something that I thought I'd completely processed and dealt with was brought back up to the surface and challenged me again. Wow, Slemaine does actually look a bit like me as a baby. Yeah. I haven't seen that photograph in ages. It's great. He keeps going from looking like his mum to looking like me, but he looks like me at the moment. Wow, I haven't seen my dad's face in ages. It's full circle, isn't it? And it's it's not been without its challenges. It's thrown up stuff, but I'm all the more just aware of how much of a sponge he is, and my childhood was, there was a lot of trauma, and that's something that I've had to overcome and deal with, and that I don't want to pass on to Slemaine. I'm very, very... And it's difficult because you don't want to be so aware that becomes your prime focus, because then it becomes too present. So it's a fine line, and it's a hard balance, but, with the support that I have from Karima, his mum, it'll be all right.
Yeah, he will be.
The challenges never stop, but you've got to make sure you just enjoy him. Just enjoy, because I tell you what, people say to you, they grow up so fast. They do. So take lots and lots of pictures and just sit back occasionally, just enjoy him.
Yeah. Do you know what? A bit of advice for parents out there, and it's something that someone gave me recently, and it's always get someone else to take a photograph of all three of you, because you always end up with photographs that have mum and baby in, or dad and baby in, but there's never mum, dad and baby. So always even if you have to trust a stranger, fingers crossed they don't run off with your phone.
Yeah. That is very, very good piece of advice. That really is for this Easter. Yeah, get somebody else to take photographs of the whole family together. Because those sometimes you're quite right. You go through the album, you think, why haven't I got one of all
my
of
dad's
us?
not in any pictures. because he always took them.
He's always taking them.
I know. Stephen, it's really good to see you again this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Take care.
Have a good Easter.
He's a nice fella, you
He's
know.
lovely. You can see just how
He's
overjoyed he is at
smitten.
just being a dad.
He
Yeah.
is smitten.
It's
And
really
that,
lovely.
isn't that a lovely thing to see? I always think, I've said for years, when one thing, I love the father-son relationship. And I think when you see these young men that I used to work with in my old place, when they were having kids, and you saw on their Instagram and things, them all being very sort of cuddly and lovely with their kids. And I just think that's the most beautiful thing. I do,
Yes,
I
of
love
course
it.
It's terribly,
Love it.
terribly
I
important.
don't know. In a way, you should be giving me advice. You've had 5 children.
Yes.
So you're the mother of advice.
No. Yeah, but you start to realise after a while that, advice is... people bring children up so differently, in such different ways. But I think the best advice is just to make sure you enjoy them when they're little, because they grow up ever so fast.
OK, well, look, stay with us. We've got lots more still to come for you in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And it's just coming up to 20 minutes past 9. We've just got a few minutes now, but we've got loads of showbiz stories to talk about with Ellie Phillips. Hi. Yeah, masses going on. Now, Tandy Newton.
Yes. Tandy Newton.
I don't even know who she is.
Oh, she's incredible. She's a Hollywood actress. She's phenomenal. Like, you would definitely
I know her face.
recognise her. Absolutely.
But she's not in Magic Mike 3.
No longer. So she was in Magic Mike 3, which is called Magic Mike The Last Dance. They were filming in London, 11 days into filming.
Oh, yes, I know her.
You know who she is now. So they were 11 days into filming, and she has stepped down from being in the film. This came overnight after reports that she was axed from the film over a fight on set. Not a physical fight, but, altercation on set with Channing Tatum, who's the star of the show, and he's also the producer. So if anyone's going to go over kind of, a tit for tat, it's going to be someone who's not the producer, essentially. So he's still on it. She's left. Her people have said that she stepped down due to family matters, and have said the reports of this fight is inaccurate, but the Hollywood Reporter are now saying that she is going to be replaced by Selma Hayek.
I think the story's great. The story's great, Ellie, but not as good as just Anne staring at the screen watching the clips of Magic Mike. You're missing a treat.
Have you seen any of the original? No. Oh, okay, so it's about male strippers.
Oh.
It's a film about male strippers, about a male strip club. It's actually really
what the heck
good.
I was looking at.
You want to see it, put it that way.
It's what I model my physique on, ladies and gentlemen.
Are you going to be in the next one?
I'm in Magic Mike 4.
Oh, fantastic.
The return.
The return.
Now, well, Dan Stevens. Talk about Dan Stevens. He's someone I haven't heard of.
OK, so Dan Stevens is an actor, and he's probably best known for playing Matthew Crawley in Downton Abbey. So he was in that the first 3 series. He's going to be in a new show, a political drama called Gaslit, which is all about the 1970s Watergate scandal.
Brilliant.
So last night he went on to the BBC One show to talk all about it, and they asked him to describe the film. And while he was describing this film, he was just so hilarious and so brilliant. He took a swipe at Boris Johnson.
OK, let's have a look.
We're entering the gripping world of the remarkable true story that saw the downfall of President Nixon in the 70s.
Yes, known as the Watergate scandal, it involves a break-in, wiretapping and a series of cover-ups by the Nixon administration. Now, a new series tells the unknown story of the woman who blew the whistle, played by Julia Roberts, and also stars our lovely Dan here. Now, this is an extraordinary story, Dan.
It is.
The series you're doing, what's the take then on it?
Well, what you've got is a criminal for a leader who is wrapped in a messy war, embroiled in a stupid scandal and surrounded by ambitious idiots, and really should resign. And no, I'm sorry, that's the intro to Boris Johnson. I've just said the intro to Boris Johnson. I'm so sorry. No, Gaslit takes quite an interesting approach to Watergate. It foregrounds a lot.
Oh, what an idiot.
I love it. I just think...
What an idiot.
Do you know what? I think you've got to make light of these things. With what's going on in the world at the moment, if someone can make someone laugh about it and just...
But you know what? I don't know they work, because I mean, look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I absolutely get that. It's just the way he did it, I think, was just really badly done.
Well, it's gone viral.
He'd rehearsed that in front of the bedroom mirror, hadn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Well, he had.
He's showing off his acting skills there as much as possible. People have gone wild about it.
Dreadful 70s hair and moustache, though, eh? Awful look.
No, I didn't do that very well. But are you a Britain's Got Talent fan? Well, of course you are.
Yeah, I do. I love a talent show. I love a talent competition. Very excited for it to be back this weekend, definitely. It's Series 15. I can't believe it.
Oh, it's hurtled along, hasn't it? OK, look, stay there, Ellie, because we're going to talk to former winner Ashley Butler, who's got her dog Sully with her. Good to see you this morning. How are you? It's 10 years ago now, isn't it, or something for you? What difference did it make to your life?
Yes, 10 years ago now, which makes me feel very old, first of all. But I wish I could just go back and do it all again, because it honestly was the greatest experience of my life, and it opened so many incredible avenues for us and career paths. So yeah, wouldn't change it for the world.
Of course, the dog we remember isn't the lovely dog who's with you now. The dog we remember was Pudsey, who's sadly no longer with us. But tell us about your new... Oh, there's Pudsey. Your new dog.
Yeah, so sadly Pudsey passed away a few years ago now, but Sully is the dog that I perform with now. You can see that he's very attention-seeking, trying to get to his treats on the table. But he has a great character about him. He makes me laugh every single day, and yeah, he loves being centre of the attention.
How do you get them to... How do you train them? How do you get them to do these amazing things? It must take forever.
Yeah, it's taken years and years of practice and experience, working alongside multiple different dogs to get to the place that I am today. Reward, finding something that my dog absolutely loves, which for Sully it's food. For other dogs it's toys. Just finding that reward that for them, when they've done what I want them to do, I can really reward them for them, and they know that once they get that reward, that what I just asked for them is what they've given me. He's trying to talk now.
He is clearly trying to talk. He's trying to say something. I don't know if you've taught him to speak yet, but what sort of dog, very quickly, what sort of dog is he?
He is a cross between a poodle, a border collie, and a Chinese crested powder puff. So,
I was silly to ask, isn't I really?
Oh,
He's absolutely gorgeous, and it's lovely to know you're still going strong.
Yeah, Ashley, thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Sully.
Oh,
gorgeous.
It was lovely.
That is it from us. We are right out of time. We're back 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and Tom Harwood's up in just a second.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit misty and murky out there for many today, but it is going to brighten up and it's going to get a bit warmer as well, not just today, but actually as we head into the Easter weekend. Low pressure clearing away to the east, another one out west, but that's only making slow progress towards us. Generally, we're sitting under a little ridge of high pressure, which will bring most of us a fine dry day today. It is quite grey and murky out there first thing, a lot of mist and low cloud in the south. It'll take a while to clear. Thicker cloud too for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. A little bit of rain here and there, certainly for the Western Isles, could be quite damp, but otherwise it's generally dry. Skies will tend to brighten. Some good spells of sunshine over northeast England and brightening up across South Wales, southern England as well. Well, we could reach 20, maybe 21 Celsius. Generally temperatures in the mid to high teens. Still a bit cooler across Western Scotland, where there will be that thicker cloud and a bit more rain just trickling in to the far west of Scotland, particularly the Highlands through this evening. Rain edging away from the north of Northern Ireland, so for many it becomes dry and clear. Again, turning a bit misty and murky, especially along the south coast, and temperatures dropping down into single figures. On to Good Friday, and for most it's a fine-looking day, dry and bright. There will still be some patchy rain across northern Scotland, maybe a few showers across Shetland, certainly early on. The threat of cloud increasing further west. We may just see 1 or 2 showers developing during the afternoon, but for many places it's a brighter day on Friday, better chance of seeing some lengthier spells of sunshine. And it will be feeling warmer once more. Temperatures more widely into the high teens, perhaps into the low 20s across the southeast. Some coasts will be cooler, particularly if it's misty and murky around the southwest or on the east coast of England with the breeze from the sea. Into the long weekend, many places will be dry, certainly for the first few days, and quite warm when the sun's out. We are going to see a change to cooler, more showery weather for Easter Monday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.